police are just going to sit down with their suspect and say, hey, homicide suspect, we think you did this murder. Here's everything we have on you. Here's everything we don't have on you. Why don't you just help us fill in the blanks out of the goodness of your heart? Do you really honestly think that's how it's supposed to work? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He knew exactly why he was there, and that's why we see multiple times before he's even told that he's under investigation for any crime of violence or being questioned about any crime of violence, he's reassuring the police he doesn't do violence. First time.
I don't steal, I don't hit no licks, I don't rob anybody, I don't know nothing.
Second time.
I'm not a strong arm, I didn't do nothing to nobody.
Third time.
I didn't commit no crime in getting them, I didn't take them strong arm, I didn't rob nobody.
Fourth time.
Involved in nothing, I don't rob, I don't steal, I work on a manager at Fresh Roots.
Fifth time.
I walk around downtown, I do not steal, I do not commit no crimes, I'm not strong arm robbing nobody, I'm not stealing from properties or doing nothing of the sort, sir.
What's interesting is he says I'm not robbing or strong arming anybody in the very same breath that he says he's not committing any crimes, which we know is a lie. Sixth time.
I'm not robbing nobody, I'm not hurting nobody, I'm not doing nothing.
Seventh time.
I'm not hurting nobody, I'm not doing nothing. I'm not stealing nothing, I don't go this.
Eighth time.
I'm going out like I'm walking. I'm not like, I'm not committing no crimes, I'm not hurting nobody, I'm not doing nothing wrong.
Ninth time.
Excuse me, but I'm telling you guys, I'm not hurting nobody, I'm not doing it.
And then we have him volunteering that he's going to be a snitch for law enforcement, an act of desperation on his part.
Weed houses, fucking human trafficking houses, I will tell you all that, and that's all on the east side. I will tell you anything you need to know, I'm not on no bullshit.
He'll tell you anything you need to know about weed houses and human trafficking to get out of there. Then we have his shifting knowledge about the victim. So even in his second interrogation, when he says he didn't see a lady, listen to this.
What lady, bro? What lady, bro? What lady?
The lady when you saw the emergency services,
I only shoot security, bro. I don't see no lady, I only shoot security, bro.
But then, oh yeah, actually, heard about this on the news.
Right, me and my boss talk about this lady. We seen her on the news when it happened, bro. Right?
So you're familiar with this lady? You know what
Just straight out of the news.
Yet he refuses to tell her, refuses to say what her name is.
Hello, Wall.
No,
That's what I'm telling her name is, right?
That's what you said her name is. I don't know her name. I don't know her by person.
So what does that say?
I don't know her by nothing.
Then you have his interrogation on November 30th, where he repeatedly denies, adamantly denies that he encountered anyone or anything out of the ordinary that night. You're going to get this instruction on false exculpatory statements that says in part that if a defendant makes a claim that is false that tends to exculpate him, like saying, I didn't see a body, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary that night, that you can use that evidence as consciousness of his guilt. And you should use that evidence here, because listen to his systematic lies. Listen to him lie with complete ease over and over, contradicting the sworn testimony that he gave in court. First time.
Do you see anything out of the way or anything out of normal?
I didn't see nothing or nothing out of the way or normal.
Okay.
Second time.
There was an incident in one of the condos, right?
What incident?
Yeah, it was somebody got into it with somebody in one of the condos.
I didn't get into it with nobody in no condos. I don't have no interaction with nobody. I didn't have no interaction with nobody this whole night.
Third time.
The only thing I seen was a white security car with a yellow top light that was just going around, and I did from there.
Fourth time.
I left the whole night, like I don't know nothing, I didn't see nothing out the way besides that, I took off running.
Fifth time.
I did not have one interaction with nobody because I ran every time. Like an interaction that even happened, like if a security brought on.
Sixth time.
Did you see anything unusual?
I didn't see
Anything
anything.
that shocked you?
I didn't see nothing that shocked me. I didn't see nothing that shocked me besides security, bro.
Seventh time.
I didn't see nothing shocking. I seen security, and I ran. That was it. I had no other interaction with nobody else that night.
Eighth time.
Cool. I had no interactions with nobody else because I ran every time.
Ninth time.
Fuck is her, bro.
Yeah, I know who she is.
Why is you saying her? I never had no interaction with nobody. I never had no interaction with nobody. I never went into nobody's condo, nobody's place or nothing. I only went to parking structures, and walked around and jiggled on a few fucking car door handles, bro. I never did nothing else. I didn't see nothing else out the norm. I didn't hear nothing else out the norm or nothing. I'm not getting what you like looking for. You keep saying her. Who the fuck is her?
Now, the defense wants to gaslight you into believing that these lies that he just told you, that this is all because the police lied to him and said that they had his phone crossing the threshold into Miss Woll's home. And that's true. Sergeant Ford did say that at some point. And the reason he said that is because of the pattern that you saw throughout this entire interrogation, that his story changed every time he was confronted with more evidence. But the important thing to recognize, those 9 times that he denied seeing anything out of the ordinary, coming across anyone, having any interactions with anybody, those lies were all before Sergeant Ford said that he had his phone going across the threshold, had his phone going inside the house. So the idea that Sergeant Ford, it's his fault that the defendant lied, is completely ridiculous. And then after he's told that, yeah, he continues to lie. 10th time.
Security.
Okay.
Didn't bump into anyone, didn't bump into anybody.
11th time.
And no interaction with nobody except for security, and I ran out of that place.
12th time.
I don't know nothing about nobody. I didn't encounter nobody or nothing.
13th time.
Tripped over nobody. There was nobody out there.
14th time.
I walked those blocks. I was in that area. I did not hear nothing. I did not see nothing out the norm. I seen security and got the fuck on.
15th time.
Outside of nothing what you said.
16th time.
Out the norm or nothing.
17th time.
Kill nobody. I don't know what happened. I didn't see nobody. Get hurt or nothing, but I feel.
And then it's more of the same. 10 days later, once he's confronted with the DNA evidence and he sits down with Sergeant Ford again, it's more of the same. It's lies and a little bit of rage sprinkled in there. 18th time.
Yes. Yes, sir.
No.
Here what?
I didn't do nothing to nobody, bro. I'm telling you, I didn't see no one or nothing. So,
19th time.
okay. You and I come in contact with another person that make any sense.
20th time.
What was a fucking car lots? That's it, bro, cars. I don't run into no physical person, bro. I only see security in the vehicle, and I got the fuck on.
21st time.
I understand being there, but whose blood? Whose blood?
The victim's blood.
I don't even know no victim, bro. I never met no victim. I never seen nobody else that night or nothing except for homeless people, bro.
22nd time.
Bro, I did not hurt nobody. I don't care what you talking about with DNA on my coach, bro. I did not hurt nobody or see nobody.
23rd time.
There.
I didn't have that to my body, though, but I didn't see no woman. I don't know this woman. I don't know anything about the woman except for when it popped up on the news, bro. That's it. The only thing that I know that I was in the wrong area at the wrong time. I didn't run into nobody. I only see security in a fucking car.
24th time.
Dang. Why the fuck? Hold on.
It's on you. No. Never see nobody. I don't know why I'm doing it though. If we ain't just seen it.
And they want to tell you that, yeah, Sergeant Ford used some tough words with the defendant, but they want to make him seem like he's acting like a little angel in this interrogation. And it's okay for him to start this interrogation off with another lie where he claims that he's slow and can't read or write.
I'm slow, man.
I got you.
And then he mocks Sergeant Ford for his hand having a tremor.
Right there. Okay, that's cool. I'm nervous. Samantha Wall. It's okay.
There we go. Can you see?
He repeatedly calls him slow. But he's acting like an angel in there. This is the common sense case for a conviction. These are the circumstances that tell you beyond any reasonable doubt that the defendant did this. Now again, when you were sworn as jurors, before you were sworn, you were chosen because you all agreed to use your common sense in evaluating this evidence. And this is the common sense evidence. This is the common sense case that the people have presented in this case. What you have seen from the defense is the opposite of that. Okay, it is the job of the defense in every case to try to create reasonable doubt. That's their job. But there is a difference between creating reasonable doubt and creating unreasonable distractions. And that's what you've seen throughout this case. You've seen a series of unreasonable distractions. You have seen common sense get assaulted throughout this case. There are so many distractions that have been brought up, so many attempts to deflect to things that aren't relevant that it's hard to quantify all of them. But I want to walk through some of these before I comment on the defendant's own testimony. Remember the dating article? Samantha Woll had an article on her phone bookmarked, Why You Need to Date Someone Who Scares You. The defense injected that into the case to try to, I guess, insinuate something. And then when we actually asked a witness to read the actual article that clearly says, date someone who scares you because they encourage you to face all the things you've tried to suppress for so long. Date someone who lovingly pushes you to become more who you are at your core as a person. They don't even want that read out loud. Distraction. This idea that the police scanner app was somehow utilized for weather, when now his own testimony contradicts that he was using it for nefarious purposes. Distraction. This idea that the victim's GPS data on her phone, which shows these minor variations in the GPS coordinates throughout the night, they want to use that to try to say that her phone was moving or not still that entire time. But when I actually ask the FBI analyst who's qualified to opine on this issue, they don't want him to be allowed to answer. Distraction. And you can see even in the data that when we know her phone is still, her phone's found underneath the couch hours after her death, but even at 4:23 and 4:29 after that last motion is detected, yeah, there's minor deviations in the GPS coordinates, and that's not necessarily consistent with the phone moving. That is consistent with the network of satellites moving around a planet that is rotating. It's not a perfect pinpoint measure. And anytime you open your phone in your experience and go into Apple Maps or Google Maps or whatever, and you see that dot isn't exactly where you are, you know exactly what that is. GHB, they want to inject into the case. They call a medical examiner, their own medical examiner, to say this is an issue that needs to be looked into. But they don't even bother to give him the actual toxicology report of the actual toxicologist who testified, who looked into this issue, and her conclusion was this level of 8.3 micrograms per milliliter in her blood is approximately 10 times less than the amount that you would expect to see if any one of us dropped dead right now and had our blood drawn and was refrigerated. Distraction. This is not consistent with her having the date rape drug being ingested into her system. This is normal that you would expect to see in any person's blood. Then we have all these questions about the scene, okay? And, we have a scene that was processed by 3 different law enforcement agencies at the local, at the state, and the federal level. But the defense knows this little speck on the ground, that must have been blood that somebody missed. They know that for sure. And how much time did we spend going over that ad nauseum? Distraction. And you heard cross-examination of one of the first homicide detectives who was on the scene, Sergeant Zhao, about whether these cards were in plain view. And yeah, he was confused about the exact sequence or the exact location of where these cards were. But if you look at the photos before that, you can see the laptop was covering that. But just the idea that because we can't prove that anything was missing in that house, that anything was actually taken, that we somehow can't prove his intent to take something from that house by going in there, it doesn't make any sense. Look at this. When he's climbing over that wall, we don't have proof that he actually took anything when he went into that parking structure, but we know exactly what his intent was when he went over the wall. The fact that we can't prove that something was taken is of absolutely no consequence in this case. Distraction. And we have Herbstman's cameras. They wanted you to believe that he maliciously tore these down to hide evidence of him leaving the house on the night of Samantha Woll's death. But then we see, lo and behold, the officers took those down as part of their ordinary course of what they do when executing a search warrant. Distraction. Herbstman's gloves and jackets, all this time spent pointing out that, yeah, he had a North Face jacket. He had surgical gloves. So what? He wasn't the one praying around in the middle of the night in Samantha Woll's neighborhood wearing blue surgical gloves and a North Face jacket. That was the defendant. That was uniquely him. Distraction. Then we spent all this time with the wrong person on the video. Again, this 1 minute, roughly 1 minute and 30-second portion at an inconsequential time. Yeah, it was the wrong guy in the video. It's a good catch. But that doesn't change the fact that every single other portion of the video is the defendant. All the times where we see him committing crimes, that's the defendant. That's not this other guy. Distraction. And then we have this person running away at approximately 1:24. And if you look at this video, if you really go frame by frame, which you'll have the opportunity to do once you take the evidence back with you to deliberate, you can see that this car pulls up just before 1:21. You can see it looks like a door opens. The door opens, and then you can see a person emerge from the car. And this happens from 1:20 and 56 seconds to 1:22 and 23 seconds. And they want you to believe that she was killed at this time, at around this time, when it just so happens, again, her phone is being continuously used during this time. 1:14 to 1:22, continuous use. 1:27 to 1:29, continuous use. 1:29 to 1:35, continuously used. And they would just have you believe that she gets stabbed 8 times and just decides to watch Netflix with the last minutes of her life. It's preposterous. And then lo and behold, when her phone is found, it's not full of blood. Where's the blood all over the phone? If she was using her phone after she got stabbed, where's the blood on the phone? There's like a speck, a drop. If she was using the phone after she got stabbed, that thing would have been soaked in blood. But it wasn't, because she was still alive at 1:35 when her phone stops being used because she fell asleep at that time. She was still alive then. That's it. Distraction. And then we have the shifting narrative of who did this. who did this. In the opening statement, you heard Jeff Herbstman, Jeff Herbstman, Jeff Herbstman, Jeff Herbstman. Well, that didn't work. So then it's Aaron Pergament, and then that didn't work, and then it's Brett Foreman. When the defense poses this question, who killed Samantha Woll, the answer is apparently everybody but the guy with her blood on him. Of course, he's the only innocent one here. The criminal in the night, praying around her neighborhood with her blood on him, that's the only innocent person. All these other guys are guilty. And if you look at Herbstman, if you look at his statement that he made in this body-worn camera, when you have this human being basically reduced to the human equivalent of a puddle of water in this hotel parking lot, in a totally ridiculous and despondent state of mind, they want to call it a confession. The closest thing there is to a confession is this one snippet of the video right toward the beginning where he says, and then you can't really hear, and I don't remember.
I don't remember. I don't remember anything.
What's your name?
Jeffrey Herbstman.
And the officer who was there with him, Allison Baker with the Kalamazoo Police Department, didn't hear him say, I killed her and I don't remember, but when she reviewed the body cam, she thought that that's what he said. And maybe he did say that. I don't know. I don't hear it directly in there. But the point is that a confession has to be detailed. He could not provide any details. He didn't provide any details. All that he said essentially was that in this state of grief, in this state of despair that he was in, that he caused himself to believe that he was somehow responsible for her death. But he couldn't remember, couldn't tell them anything. And when they asked him, when was the last time you saw your girlfriend?
When was the last time that you saw your girlfriend?
October 7th.
October 7th?
He says it was the Jewish holiday on October 7th, which is the same thing he testified to. He didn't see her the night of her death. And the police looked into this. They scoured pretty much every aspect of his life. They put him under 24-hour surveillance, you heard from Lieutenant Sanchez. They got a search warrant for his residence. They tore up his residence. They went back a second time. They got a search warrant for the video system at the residence to try to retrieve video from the cloud, from the Arlo system. Didn't find anything because the system wasn't in use. They got a search warrant for the place next door to him to try to get their video. Couldn't find any video. They searched his vehicle, tore it up. You saw that. You saw the photos of that. They took out every single thing from that vehicle that they could find. They searched his infotainment center. They searched his phone multiple times, once on October 22nd, once after his arrest in Kalamazoo. They searched his phone records. They searched his iPad. They searched scooter companies for records for him. They searched Lyft and Uber. And they found nothing. They examined every aspect of his life, and they found no evidence that he was connected with Samantha Woll's death. And so here's kind of the box score. If you were to compare the evidence against the defendant with the evidence against Jeff Herbstman. They kind of start off at equal footing. If you look at things like fingerprints at the scene and DNA at the scene, there's nothing of value recovered in that regard for anybody. So they start off on equal footing. But then you get to the statements. And for the defendant, you have lies. You have lies. Lies and lies and lies that tell you he's guilty. For Herbstman, you have this ambiguous statement. That's all it is an ambiguous statement. Herbstman has no motive, the defendant does. Herbstman's phone doesn't put him at the location, the defendant does. Herbstman had nothing incriminating in his phone in terms of text messages, search history, the defendant did. No video connects Herbstman to this killing. Plenty of video connects the defendant. And then we have the DNA evidence. And imagine how if Jeff Herbstman had gone to trial, if somehow he had been charged and he went to trial, and our only evidence against him is this ambiguous statement that he made. And then it comes out at trial that there's this criminal in the night who is there at the time that motion went off and who has the victim's blood on him. Imagine how that prosecution would have gone. That would have exonerated him. And that's what this evidence does. It exonerates him. Then you get to the defense case in general. And the defense doesn't have to put on evidence. Again, the burden of proof is solely with the people of the state of Michigan in this case. But they chose to put on evidence. And you should consider that evidence. And you should judge that evidence in the same way that you judge my evidence. And here's the case that they put on. They call in the original officer in charge, who is on maternity leave, basically to ask her the same questions that they asked Lieutenant Sanchez, who supervised the case. And to inject this concept into the case, well, because this thing with Jeff Herbstman didn't work out, let's try to focus on Aaron Pergamon a little bit. And so they inject this concept into the case that there is a text message where Aaron Pergamon referenced having a key. But they didn't ask Aaron Pergamon about that text message. They waited until he was off the stand to inject this idea into the case, and to inject this idea into the case that he was somehow a stalker, even though there's no evidence to support that. They call a medical examiner whose basic testimony is, I don't have anything to say because I don't have enough information. That was a waste of time. And then they try to inject this theory that Brett Foreman was somehow responsible because, well, he had a hypothetical conversation with somebody, as you would expect anybody would do in these circumstances. Any curious person is going to want to know what the heck happened to their friend when there's no information out there about what happened. And he has this hypothetical conversation about what a hypothetical person might have done to get away with this. And that somehow was useful. It was a complete waste of time. If you look at, again, how this stacks up with Pergamon, there's nothing. There's nothing that connects him to this crime. Foreman, there's absolutely nothing that connects him to this crime. You're going to get this instruction on witness credibility that you should use when you evaluate the defendant's sworn testimony in this case. And that instruction that Judge Van Houten is going to give you gives you a number of factors that you should consider. Not all of them are particularly relevant, but some of them are. One of the factors is this: does the witness have any bias, prejudice, or personal interest in how this case is decided? The defendant absolutely does. You should judge his testimony recognizing that. Another factor is, in general, does the witness have any special reason to tell the truth or any special reason to lie? Again, the defendant has a very special reason to lie. It's the same reason he's been lying all along. He still has that same reason to lie. Another factor is, all in all, how reasonable does the witness's testimony seem when you think about all the other evidence in this case? And when you really examine the defendant's testimony, it is completely unreasonable. I want to walk through this point by point, and then I'm going to be mostly done for now. He would have you believe that he wasn't desperate for money, didn't need money, yet he's just out there all night stealing anything he could get his hands on out of cars. That's his starting point. Nonsense. He would have you believe that the one and only time that he goes out all night to tamper with people's cars and to steal stuff from cars was just this one night that Samantha Woll happened to be killed, even though he describes as a criminal hobby this idea that he's part of this Telegram group of guys that he sends pictures to about stealing cars. Nonsense. He would have you believe that he was not armed that night. He is going out in the middle of the night, all alone, to commit crime after crime after crime all throughout our city. Has no idea what he's going to encounter, who he's going to encounter, but he doesn't have a knife on him, doesn't have any form of protection on him, yet he just so happens to have a knife on him when he's arrested 6 weeks later, and he just so happens to have a knife in the pocket of his moose knuckles jacket, his winter jacket that's at his girlfriend's house. That knife just happened to jump into that pocket without explanation. No idea how that got there. And again, this is November 30th when he's arrested. It's colder then. It's winter jacket season. He has no idea how that knife got there, that knife that the trace evidence examiner, forensic scientist Christy Sekadat, used to cut into the fabric of Samantha Woll's hoodie, her clothing, and found that a knife entirely consistent with that knife could have made those same incisions. The same incisions that he made in her the night that she was killed. He has no idea how that knife miraculously jumped into his coat pocket. Ridiculous. He would never dare enter someone's home. Parking structures are okay. Cars are okay. I'll tell you this. If I ever woke up in the middle of the night and looked outside and saw somebody masked and wearing surgical gloves tampering with my car, my first thought wouldn't be, oh, I feel safe. That's just a car guy. I'm just going to leave my door unlocked and not think anything of it. It's ridiculous. Nothing is off limits to this man. He never noticed her front door was open, he would have you believe, as he was meticulously and methodically surveying every single car in that area, in the parking lot right in front of her home, in the parking lot adjacent to her home at the end of Joliet Place. He was surveying each and every car, and he didn't happen to see that a door was open. Look at what the cops saw when they arrived. And I can't tell you how wide the door was open. We don't know that from the ADT system data. But these buildings have glass facades. These buildings are lit up like an aquarium. And she had a light on downstairs and a light on upstairs. Anybody in and around the area, as he was, for that amount of time, close to an hour between the 2 points in time that night that he was in that area, would notice that that door was open. He, who was methodically looking for crimes of opportunity that night, would have noticed that that door was open. Then he would have you believe that immediately after running from security, he just happens to decide on a night that he's acting in complete self-interest, not thinking of anybody but himself. Suddenly he becomes a good Samaritan. And what's interesting here is, according to the video, the last time we see security coming down that street is at 4:10. 4:10. And he testified on Wednesday that he saw security and he basically ran over to the parking lot area by Miss Woll's home, right in front of her home. That gives him all the time in the world. All the time in the world, if that timeline is accurate. Then he'd have you believe that as he is running from security, thinking only of himself, committing crimes in the night, he sees a dark figure, a mysterious dark figure that he decides to take it upon himself to investigate. This is what the conditions were when the police arrived. Look at that light right at the top right-hand corner of the screen. This place was lit up like Times Square. There's no dark figure.
I agree. That's all right.
And then, of all places, he touched this dark figure's neck. That I will agree with. He did touch her neck. He touched her neck with the knife that he plunged into it repeatedly. But the idea, and this is what he would have seen as he approached her, and you heard from Kevin Mull, the person who actually found her body, that when he approached her at 6:20, he touched her back. And you can see a small area of her back was exposed. That would be the logical place. If you're going to check on her, you would touch her back. And he touched her neck. He touched her neck when she's laying like this, with her neck not at all exposed. And he says he held his hand by her face to see if there was breath coming out when her face is basically smushed into the ground. It makes absolutely no sense. It's nonsense. And then he claims that at this time, he wasn't wearing gloves. He wasn't wearing those surgical gloves because those gloves broke. They broke when he was on that wall. Well, here's the thing. After he jumps on the wall, you can see him put on the gloves after he jumps on the wall. After, not before. then when he's off the wall, long after, 20 minutes after jumping over the wall, he's got the gloves on. 3:36. He's walking down the street, and you can kind of see in this grainy video on his left hand, white, there it is, there it is. Still has the gloves on. And then he would have you believe that blood from the victim just magically transferred from his right hand, which is all he says he touched her with, and just happened to get in multiple spots down here on his arm, and happened to get, there's more blood found on the pocket. Obviously, we can't say that Samantha Woll's blood with any certainty, but there's more blood found in his left pocket area. That blood just magically transferred, and magically transferred to the backpack. Makes no sense. Makes no sense for that blood to get there if all he did was touch her. It makes a lot of sense for that blood to get there if what he did was stab her with his right arm. And then he tells you that on Wednesday he testified, he was asked whether he could see the race of this dark figure that he approached. And he said he couldn't. All he could do was tell it was a woman. But then, in a contradiction, he testified that he got out of there. He got out of there because he didn't want to be a black man caught with a dead white woman. Well, how would he know that he was with a dead white woman if he couldn't see her race? And then he's got all weekend to think about this contradiction, and comes back with a different version. Comes back with a different version yesterday, and his explanation is, by race, he meant he couldn't tell whether the victim was German or Scandinavian or Scottish. It's ridiculous. He got caught in a lie. And then he would have you believe that after getting out of there, after freaking out because he's just encountered this body and doesn't want to be with the body, that he takes the time to grab this backpack out of the bushes, which just happens to be conveniently right by Miss Woll's residence, and takes time to put the white bag inside the backpack, and then gets out of there. And then he freaks out. He freaks out because he notices that he has blood on what he says is his bare right hand. Freaks out. Well, if he's got blood on his bare right hand, why does the video show him carrying an object which looks like his phone? And this is from the Illich Holdings video. Why is he holding something with a hand that he knows has blood on it? Makes no sense. The obvious answer is that the blood was on the gloves that he got rid of. Not in his bare hand, on the gloves that he got rid of. And then he would have you believe that his girlfriend of 1 month they were together, started dating in September, just before the incident. She just happens to regularly do his laundry for him. Just happens to regularly do laundry for a man that she's been with for a month. And he puts his clothing in a hamper for her to do his laundry. And he did that with his jacket, and then acts shocked somehow that that jacket was washed. That doesn't make any sense. If he put it in the hamper, wouldn't you know it's being washed? And think about in your own experience when you've washed a jacket. It's a rare thing to do. Usually done for a specific reason, to get something specific off of it. And this just happens to happen. This jacket that has Samantha Woll's blood on it just happens to get washed just days after her murder. Come on. It's another coincidence. Another coincidence that they can't overcome. And then he claims that he didn't go back to the area of the scene the next day. He just went downtown to the mix to take his girlfriend to work. But his phone magically places him directly east of the scene. as you would expect someone to do if they are looking for information about what is out there. He got caught in a lie. He stood on that witness, he sat there in that witness chair, and he lied to you. That's all that he did. He lied, and lied. And the one thing I guess they forgot to rehearse with him was this. And he's caught in that lie. He did go back to the area of the scene, as you would expect him to do. His testimony is completely unreasonable. On each and every point, it makes no sense. It makes no sense, and it does not create reasonable, common sense doubt in this case. Now, one thing that tells us that this is unreasonable, you look at this jail call from January 23rd after the exam with the defense attorney. And the defendant asks, if this was a poker hand, who's looking good? It's interesting that he'd ask if this was a poker hand, invoking a game where you're dealt a hand, and your ability to win is dependent on how well you are able to deceive your opponent. It's interesting that he would invoke that game. And the response is, you're looking good. You're looking good based on our theory.
More so on the thing, if this was a poker hand, if this was poker, who's looking good?
Well, oh yeah. And as far as establishing, planting seeds and establishing our theory, I mean, you're looking good. I don't believe that they can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you did it. They have no evidence.
Why is it a theory? Why is it a theory? If he knows what really happened, why is it just a theory? And then you have, as the conversation continues, there's this discussion about how the judge said something to the effect of, you being the thief that you are, you could have just stumbled across her and run her pockets. Notice how the suggestion isn't you just stumbled upon her for totally innocuous reasons because you're a good Samaritan. But even that gets rejected by the defendant.
Hey, it's very plausible, it's very possible that, being a quote-unquote thief you are, came across the body.
He still had to defame a nigga. Still had to. Why would you say, Barry, that I had to check her pockets? Like, bro, I'm not no dirty nigga, bro. I'm not doing no weird.
And then again, right after that, there's this discussion. It's possible that our theory, she died earlier, got up, stumbled outside, and you, just like the other witness, came across her body and touched her.
Of our theory that she died earlier, got up, stumbled outside, and you, just like the other witness, came across her body and touched her.
Yeah.
Why is it just a theory? If that's what happened. Why is it just a theory? And then he wants you to believe that he actually, after leaving that second interrogation room on December 10th, after his lies didn't work, and he was going down to the Detroit Detention Center to get booked, he wants you to believe that he actually changed his story then and told that arresting officer, Officer Osmond, that, well, actually, this is what happened. I just touched her body. Yet conveniently, that isn't on body-worn camera footage. Yet conveniently, the officer barely recalls that conversation, which you think would be the most important part of that arrest if that actually happened. But even if he did say that, does that change anything? Does that change anything for him to do what he's been doing throughout this entire case? He says a lie that doesn't work, and then he just changes his story. And that's all that the defense is in this case. Don't believe him. Don't believe what he said, these 20, 30, 40 lies that he told during his interrogation. Don't worry about those, but believe him now. You cannot believe him. You cannot believe him. He's charged with felony murder, premeditated murder, home invasion in the first degree, and lying to the police. I'm going to spend very little time talking about these because you're going to get a detailed set of instructions from Judge Van Houten about the elements of these offenses. The thing I just want to touch on for felony murder, okay, and this is the primary charge in this case, felony murder. This is a charge where someone commits a murder in the course of committing or attempting to commit another felony, attempt being the key word. And there are two possible, what are called predicate crimes here. One is larceny, and specifically attempted larceny, again, because we can't prove that he took anything from her home. But we can prove that he attempted to, based on all the circumstantial evidence. And the other is home invasion in the first degree, which is assaulting Samantha Woll inside of her home after entering that home without permission. Either one of those is sufficient to meet the predicate felony requirement for felony murder. You don't have to find both of them, you just have to find one of them. And again, attempt is the operative word here. We don't have to prove that the felony or the larceny was completed. An attempt is enough. For premeditated murder, this is a alternative count. I'm not asking you to convict them of both. There's no reason to convict them of both counts 1 and 2. This is an alternate theory, okay? And the theory is not that he came inside that house with a premeditated intent to kill her. The circumstantial evidence doesn't suggest that. The circumstantial evidence suggests that this was a crime of opportunity, but that once he got in that house, once whatever happened, he made the decision to take that knife out and to stab her with it. And premeditation can happen. It can happen in a matter of seconds. It can happen instantaneously, and you'll see that in the instructions that you get. It's up to you to determine how much time it takes for someone to premeditate. But the core of this case is and always has been felony murder. I'm asking you to convict him on count 1. You're also going to have an option to convict him of second-degree murder. If you find that some of the elements are missing, which you should not here, you can convict him of the lesser-included second-degree murder, and you'll get the instruction on that. Again, home invasion count 3, that's based on the idea that he did not have permission to enter the home, and he entered that home. Samantha Woll was there, and he assaulted her inside that home. That satisfies the elements of home invasion, and then lying to the police is based on him being told about the property crimes that he was being under investigation for, and lying and lying and lying about those property crimes. I'm going to sit down now. I'm going to have an opportunity to address you again once the defense has completed its closing argument. I thank you again for your service in this case. I thank you for listening to me. Thank you for hearing me out. I just ask that you keep hold of that common sense. Keep hold of that common sense that's been guiding you throughout this case and will hopefully continue to guide you throughout your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Do the jurors need a quick restroom break before we go into defense? Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute recess till 5, and we'll have first row. Are you just going to go out there and interact? You want to go out? Okay. Clear the first row, please. Jurors, take it out.
Record, the Oxbow is going to be over an hour also.
We'll go until
Okay.
you're done.
Okay.
But we may have to do his rebuttal after lunch, I'm not sure. But see how things, I mean, we'll see how far we'll pass through you do, so. Because I've got a bunch of things scheduled too, so, we'll go till you're done. What we might have to do rebuttal and instructions and questions.
Even though he's a celebrity, it shouldn't keep the jury selection from moving quickly. And she warned the attorneys to keep it very succinct, to ask questions, don't just talk. She wants a jury by this afternoon. Here's what we know about today's process. Each side gets 50 minutes to interview potential jurors and identify which ones they need to interview separately at sidebar. The defense can dismiss up to 5 potential jurors with those preemptory strikes. The prosecution dismissed 3 without cause. The goal here, to see 12 jurors and a handful of alternates by this afternoon. She wants this process to begin. She talked about it yesterday during that motion hearing.
I think we're going to have 79 on the panel, and we will be able to know immediately. You're going to get five and 3. Is that right? Yes, 5 and 3, and for causes, and we'll know whether we need a second jury panel by then. If you can't pick a jury out of 79 folks, which I find highly doubtful, then we'll call in the next panel. Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
And does the next panel come in that same?
Staggered. Yes, it's staggered. That's why when we're finished with the 79, I want to know if I have a jury.
Okay.
So, yes. Okay. I want to know how many, and we'll know probably by the 4 causes.
Understood.
Okay.
The final issue that Your Honor raised before our original break today was the voir dire and how to run it, and any insight we had. The parties were able to confer on that too. And in the Hannah Gutierrez-Reed case, you did the voir dire regarding guns.
I did?
I think so. I think you made that one of your questions to the panel. I could be wrong.
I don't think so. I usually would not do that.
Oh, you would not? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's just one topic that I think may be of the sensitivity and the type of topic that we may want the whole panel to hear and be able to approach on as a topic potentially.
I usually do not conduct any particular question other than what the UJI requires the judge to go through, and it usually stops on, is there any reason why you can't serve on this case? And then I turn it over to you for the specifics. So
Fair enough.
So what do you say?
No, now I'm saying very little because you've just explained to me exactly how my understanding had been that you addressed a couple of these issues yourself.
Of course, I could have. I can't remember it too much. Okay.
And then the only other topic that we're going to raise is just the strong views on Mr. Baldwin in both directions that we're going to ask. We're going to be more eager to ask the court to take people individually on. But other than that, what the court had said made sense, and we have nothing further. So the way I've done it, especially in cases that have been heavily followed and there's media involved, is the court clerk or somebody will take, or I can take a roll call, and it'll be 14, 18, 19, 20. They go into the hallway and they say, jurors number 14, 18, 19, 20, please line up at the door during the recess. We speak to them each for 60 seconds during the recess, and then we're done.
Okay. Well, I hope that they do that for you.
Okay, we'll see how that process actually unfolds. You never know. Jury selection is such an interesting beast. Let's talk about it. From Los Angeles, California, Deputy Public Defender Philip Dubé is with us. And here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, celebrity attorney Chris Melcher with us on set here. Welcome to you both. Philip, let's start with you. Alec Baldwin, big celebrity. How much does that matter, do you think, in terms of this jury selection process? The judge wants this done by this afternoon. I've covered cases, especially with celebrities, where jury selection lasts 2 weeks. Your take, does it matter how many questions each side gets for these jurors?
Oh, yeah, Ted. I mean, imagine trying to meet your soulmate when you're only able to ask them a few questions, I liken it to going on a blind date. You have to decide in a couple of hours if this is the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. If you only get to propound a few questions, you get a few minutes with a pool of, 70 people to decide whether or not you should go to prison. I think it's artificially restricted. There's no reason why this judge can't give people a little more time. But to be honest with you, I do believe that there are going to be 12 people in New Mexico who can be fair, unbiased, and impartial, set aside everything that they've heard in the media, on the news, and have read in the papers or online, and give this man a fair trial. He has the Hollywood allure, and everybody's heard of him, frankly, and it's not uncommon to go out of state on a trial where your jury pool has never even been to California. He's always going to have that Hollywood star power attraction, that sort of Tinseltown allure. And I don't know, I think the best is yet to come for him. I do. I think he's going to walk.
The Alec Baldwin, though, is different, Chris, from a Johnny Depp, a Taylor Swift. Of course, that would be, everybody loves her, Alec Baldwin, yeah, I've heard of him, but I might have heard of some bad things that he's possibly done. And you might not have a great feeling about him. If you're representing Baldwin and you have jurors that raise their hand, they've heard of him, they've seen his, what more do you want to know?
Well, there could be strong feelings. He is a dominant person. And really, to me, if I'm picking this jury, I want to know what the jurors' experience is with firearms, because that's the deciding factor. When people I talk to, if you grew up with guns, you know that you never trust anyone's word that that thing's unloaded. And people who didn't would accept that an actor could just be handed a gun and assume that it's unloaded. And that would be the core question that I would be asking.
Yesterday was a big day for all sides, but the defense seemed to be the big winner from the motions hearing. The judge granted several of the defense motions, including to preclude evidence relating to Baldwin's role as a producer. That was the big one. Denied the state's motion to exclude evidence of separate civil cases against the defendant. That will come in. And also, what was denied from the state side, videos of Baldwin yelling at the crew. And we saw this during the Hannah Gutierrez trial, where he was, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. And there are apparently some other ones where he's swearing at people. He's being very boisterous and downright rude. That's not coming in. Philip, how big a win is that for the state as they try to portray him as a person that doesn't care, to the point where someone was killed?
Well, I think it's a big win for the defense, because essentially what the prosecution is trying to do is impute guilt, if you will, just by implication of being a producer to a major production. It's unfair, frankly. You know, California, and I'm sure other states, have what's called the apex doctrine, where you go after the person on top because, you know, the fish rots, so to speak, from the head down, and you go after the big guy, the big guns. They're responsible for everything. But in criminal law, culpability, guilt, liability only attaches to the actual offender. And if you get to bring in all this evidence as being the lead, the producer, the director, the person in charge, the head honcho, it makes it look like you could impute everything that goes wrong on set to Alec Baldwin. So I think that was the right ruling, and I think the prosecution should be a little nervous about that, because now Alec is going to come off as just being sort of like the innocent worker on set who relied on the master prop artist, the armorer, to hand him a cold gun, where he could rely, in fact, on it being loaded with a dummy or a blank and go on about filming. You know, how the heck was he supposed to know that a live round would slip through, go through a double check, a third?
I know for the record, Mr. Jackson-Bolanos is present, as are all counsel, and our 14 jurors have returned to the courtroom. We're ready to continue with defense's closing argument.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for staying with us for almost a month to hear the testimony of the inquiry of who killed Samantha Wall. Now, I know that we've been here for almost a month, and that was the inquiry. However, that question was never answered by the prosecution. Now, they want to say that the defense had a particular theory of what happened. Yes, we have a theory of what happened. Just like they stated, this is their theory. Now, as a defense attorney, do I know exactly what happened to Samantha Wall? No, I don't. If I did, I would be sitting in that chair testifying during this trial, saying, in fact, I saw exactly what happened to Samantha Wall, and this is what happened, A, B, and C. But unfortunately, I don't know exactly what happened. I can look at the evidence, I can use my common sense, and come to a conclusion that I know for a fact that Mr. Michel Jackson-Bolanos had nothing, absolutely nothing, to do with the death of Samantha Wall. Now, throughout this case, I believe it was stretched dramatically. Half of the case, the prosecutor used to defend Jeff Hersman, instead of showing you evidence that would implicate if Michel Jackson-Bolanos committed this murder. And why was he didn't do that? Because he did not have evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that, in fact, Mr. Michel Jackson-Bolanos killed Samantha Wall. this particular case, he states, is circumstantial. This case involves the wrong person who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. We first heard from Kevin Mull, who was their witness. He testified that at first he couldn't even see the body from 40 or 50 yards away. He didn't even know it was a body until he got much closer. Prosecution wants to imply that, oh, this scene was lit up so much, you would have been able to see Samantha Wall from space. Their own witness stated he couldn't even see it. He didn't even see or notice the blood at all. He states that he did touch the body. He touched an exposed part of her back. He then went back to his wife. They called 911. He was then asked to do CPR, and he stated in his mind he did not think CPR would be necessary because she was already dead, from his opinion. Now asked whether or not there was blood on his clothes, he said he doesn't believe so. Now, did he actually check? Was his clothes actually analyzed? Had his clothes been analyzed, would we find trace amounts of blood on his sleeve or on his elbow? We don't know, because that was not done. We asked Detective Sanchez about whether or not blood or clothing is analyzed from an individual, and he stated there was no reason, if a responding person or caller of 911 touches the body, there's no reason to believe that there should be blood or analyze this particular clothing. But what do we have? We have a contradiction. Officer Dowd testified that in his report, he stated that nobody touched the body. And he spoke to Kevin Mull. Now, I'm not saying that Kevin Mull is a liar, but you have two inconsistent statements about whether or not somebody touched the body, which Detective Sanchez said would be grounds in order to analyze that clothing to see if there was blood on that particular clothing. If you have two inconsistent statements, one from a responding individual and two from a responding officer who stated that nobody touched the body. He also stated that Samantha's door was open. We saw a picture of the body cam showing that Samantha's door was open, wide open. I don't contest that. In fact, her door had to be open. How would she get outside? She can't walk through doors. She had to open the door at least a little bit in order to go outside. He also stated that her arms were to her chest and that he himself was trained in CPR, and based upon his experience, he opined that if somebody were to try to check her pulse, it is very possible that, in fact, their arm could make contact with her body. She was laying there. Her blood was on her clothes, saturated. Blood on her hair. It is very possible if an individual is going to check her pulse on her neck, that their sleeve would make contact with her hair. Their sleeve could make contact with the back of her clothing and transfer blood from her to their garment. Officer Q, he testified and tried to convince us that, in fact, he arrived to the scene at 6:38, even though his body cam shows him at 6:49 and 53 seconds inside of his car. Now, one may say this is inconsequential on exactly what time he got there, but I suggest that this was a pattern. This was a pattern of law enforcement officers either making false statements about what they did in part of an investigation or not doing in a thorough investigation. Now, I walked Officer Q to this particular point and asked him, Officer Q, you see your body cam. It states 6:49, roughly 6:50, you're still in the car, correct? He said, correct. There's no reason to believe that your body cam was not calibrated for the correct time, correct? Correct. And then I say, Officer Q, you got to the scene at 6:50, right? He said, no, got there at 6:38. In fact, and despite the evidence that's presented in front of him, he denies he got there at 6:50, a pattern. We next heard from Detective Zoo, who indicated that in his opinion there was evidence of a struggle, which the prosecutor fails to show you this particular clip, of a fruit bowl knocked over in the kitchen, fruit on the floor, that would suggest that this particular altercation originated in the kitchen. Now, how could it originate in the kitchen if she's laying asleep on the couch? At some point in time, she would have to get up from the couch, if she was sitting on the couch, go to the kitchen, and that's when the struggle started. He also tried to convince himself and us that, in fact, he tampered with evidence. He convinced himself that he removed her credit cards from her wallet and transferred them to a whole different area of this particular apartment and put them on the table. When I asked him, does that make sense for you to do that? He said, no, it doesn't make sense. And it had to be back and forth before he finally realized or came to the conclusion and admitted that, in fact, okay, maybe I did not do that. We have her purse, we have her car keys in plain view when you walk into the apartment. Soon as you walk into the apartment. Had this been a larceny, an attempted robbery, that's the first thing somebody's going to notice. It's the keys and the purse. Now, they want to insinuate that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, in fact, did this. We know he was hitting cars. We know he has a history of cars. Now, if he wanted to steal her car, her key is right there. This has a panic button on the key. So if individual didn't know what her car was, they would be able to hit the alarm on there or the unlock button of this particular remote and get a signal from the car, in fact, what car that this particular key is associated with. Laptops, credit cards, money, nothing's taken. Forensic Tech Carrington Sheridan. Now, she testified that this is possible suspected blood. Do we know for sure what it is? No, we don't, because we have no pictures at all of the basement floor. And we know that the forensic techs, they weren't just on their own direction of what they did. They were being directed by the officers in charge at the particular scene of what pictures to take, what evidence to collect. Now, why wasn't this particular seat photographed? Why wasn't the floor photographed? I don't know. I would suggest that this was a lack of being thorough in their investigation. There was evidence of blood going down the steps, but then we have no pictures. We have no pictures next to the steps leading there. How do we know if there are other blood spots on the floor? We just have to assume that they're not, just because of the tremendous amount of blood that was associated upstairs? Do we know that? Detective Zhao also indicated that there was evidence of a disturbance of drawers on the very top floor to insinuate that possibly somebody went upstairs. Do we know that? I don't know. Forensic Tech Carrington Sheridan also testified that the blood outside appeared to be wet. The blood inside appeared to be somewhat dry. What would that, to a person with common sense, indicate? That the blood outside was transferred at a later time than the blood that was inside. We know that the blood inside was classified by Jody Johnson as being a pool of blood. A pool of blood is a copious amount of blood
that it's accumulated in one particular place over a particular time. And this blood had an opportunity to dry by the time the forensic techs arrived to the scene, because this particular blood that was inside was transferred at a much earlier time than the blood outside. She also stated that there was a suspected struggle in the living room. Why do we think that? Joni Johnson also stated that. We have the pillow that's on top of the blood. That means that the blood was accumulated on the floor prior to the pillow being knocked on top of the blood, which would suspect that there was some type of struggle to knock that pillow off and for it to land on top of the blood. Now, we also heard from their neighbor, James Griffin. He testified that he doesn't remember or doesn't acknowledge hearing somebody scream. However, that's not what he said on the night of. We know for a fact that he was trying to convince himself that, in fact, he did not hear the assault of Samantha Wall. Said he went outside around 1:20ish to walk his dog. He says he routinely goes out there around 12:30. This particular night was an hour later. He heard a very distinction of a woman originally screaming, saying, don't hit me no more. Don't stab me. A direction from the Joliet area. He never said anything about sound bouncing off a building. He never said anything about thinking it was somebody striking. He stated that he was feeling guilty for the last 24 hours, feeling callous for the last 24 hours because he knew in his heart. And then he tried to deny he said that. But then when confronted with the truth, he had to admit, but he wanted to explain it. It was obvious from his passion and his emotions on the body-worn camera what he actually felt. He also stated that the walls are so thin in these apartments that he just assumed it was somebody else's responsibility. It wasn't his responsibility, and it was eating him alive. And if anybody can reassure to him that he did not hear what he knows, what we know he heard, he can sleep better. It makes him sleep better at night, knowing that he could have done something. He could have maybe went there, called the police. She could have received medical aid much sooner than when she collapsed outside and when Mr. Hull found her. She would have been able to have medical attention around 1:20, 1:30. We wouldn't be here right now. We definitely wouldn't be here with an innocent man being accused of a murder he did not commit had she got that particular aid when she was originally assaulted. We then heard from Paul Spurgeon. What did he say? In regard to Samantha Wall, she did not sleep on her new couch since moving into Joliet. She also slept in T-shirts. She was miserable trying to make a relationship with Jeff Hersman work. We know that Samantha Wall was not found in a T-shirt. She was found in sweatpants in a jacket with a hood to it. Not sleepwear. Not something that you would put on if you were preparing to go to sleep coming from a wedding. Especially if you never slept on that particular couch. Why would you be on the couch? Was she waiting for somebody? Did she travel home with somebody? We don't know. Everyone told Samantha to get rid of Jeff Hersman. We also know that she went to Utah to clean him out of her system. But after she returned from Utah, she was still in contact. Paul Spurgeon confronted her about that. He expressed his feelings as a friend to her about why are you still dating this guy? You told me you were going to Utah to get rid of him, but you're still dating him? We know that Samantha Wall was also self-conscious about things. So she didn't want the criticism. She wouldn't keep telling Paul that, in fact, she was still involved with Jeff Hersman after he confronted her about it. We saw that type of behavior in regards to Bob Becker, Robert Becker. He testified that she never told her parents that she was sexually active with him because he was not Jewish. And the type of criticism that she would receive from her parents for dating somebody and having a sexual relationship, even though they had sexual chemistry, because he's not Jewish. She was also self-conscious about a lack of employment at that particular time. She also uses heart emojis with everyone, well, almost everyone. He stated that she sent a heart emoji at 1 o'clock to a David Wilkinson. Also, Aaron Pergament was out of her league. He would want a relationship. He called her all of the time. Stated that he was, quote unquote, in sales. Was very aggressive with his communication with her on the frequency on which he called. Paul Spurgeon said it could have been due to just the nature of his employment. We don't know. Now, Jeff Hersman, the individual which the prosecutor put his defense hat on in order to try to convince us that Jeff Hersman is innocent. He wouldn't harm a soul. What do we know about Jeff Hersman? He admitted to being a pragmatist, meaning that he operates in a very methodical and analytical way. He also stated, contrary to what the prosecutor said, he stated himself, he had motive. He had opportunity. And he was trying to outsmart individuals, a.k.a. i.e. the police. The motive. Samantha Wall broke up with him. He was upset about that. And not only did she break up with him, she rejected him multiple times. He stepped out of his comfort zone, out of his bubble, to change certain character traits that he exhibited. He analyzed himself and said, hey, I have these particular flaws in me. I'm going to correct those flaws in an attempt to win Samantha Wall's heart over. What did she do? She rejected him. How would that make him feel? Not happy. Certainly not happy. Especially when he finds out that she's dating multiple individuals and in his mind feels that he's smarter than them. They don't compare to him. Aaron Pergament doesn't compare to Jeff Hersman. We saw Aaron Pergament. We saw Jeff Hersman. Aaron Pergament is, between me and you, he is out of her league. He's much older. He's friends with her parents. Now, how would that make him feel? He doesn't receive emojis. Paul Spurgeon said everybody gets these heart emojis, except Jeff Hersman. He said he doesn't get them. How would that make you feel? Your girlfriend sending heart emojis to everybody else except you? Even despite your attempts to win her heart over? The opportunity. Absolutely, he had the opportunity. Because he was trying to outsmart individuals. He leaves his phone at home. He can walk there. He's an avid walker and runner. He's an avid bicyclist. Now, why didn't the detectives know anything about this prior to me asking these questions on cross-examination? Their lack of doing a thorough investigation, even though they want to give this impression that they left no stone unturned. But I surmise to say that there are a lot of stones that were left unturned, not even looked at, such as any stones that have been in the fire pit. I don't think didn't know anything about this fire pit until I asked about this fire pit. Then all of a sudden, yeah, we knew about this fire pit, but we don't know whether or not there's any remains of clothing in this fire pit, any use of accelerants in this fire pit, any acknowledgement that this fire pit exists, any photographs of this fire pit, no knowledge of a bonfire, which was testified by Paul Spurgeon and Jeff Hersman, no evidence whatsoever. When he was arrested, already had a criminal defense lawyer. Already had one when he talked to the police. Called his parents. And the police were very nice to him. Very nice to him. And we saw the the difference in how Mr. Jackson-Bolanos was treated versus how Mr. Hersman was treated. Oh, would you like me to call your parents? Oh, would you like any snacks, anything to drink? Just very pleasurable, very cordial with them. Now, I'm not saying that they should have just been treating him like Mr. Jackson-Bolanos and calling him, a homeless motherfucking liar and not all of that. But they could at least show Mr. Jackson-Bolanos that same type of respect. However, his father tells him, don't say anything. Don't talk to the police. Mother doesn't even ask why he's there. He calls the police, and what mother doesn't ask why you are in the police station? What happened? What are they saying? What are they arrested you for? I mean, some type of questions would be warranted for somebody who cares about you, especially if they got a defense lawyer for you already. Now, I believe that Jeff Hersman, he told his parents prior to him smoking marijuana, becoming very paranoid, along with any other drugs he was probably taking, such as mushrooms, and then a combination of who knows what else, that led to a guilt-stricken paranoia where he just could not control his emotions at that particular time, and they just burst out, and he could not control himself. His parents probably said, wait, the lawyer right now, she's out of town or something like that. Don't do anything rash. He went there and started smoking and thinking about it. And he suggests that, he convinced himself. But what else we know? We know prior to him calling 911, he thought about and started to worry about whether or not he brought the correct clothes to Kalamazoo. So what does that tell us? That means he had to first be analytical and think about, A, what he brought to Kalamazoo, and also what he could have brought to Kalamazoo, and how that would be perceived by individuals who were looking at what he wore. So he had time to think about this. He also had time to think about whether or not he would get along with his program director. So he had to think about possible conversations of what could have been spoken about between him and his program director, possible conclusions to that particular conversation, and what could have happened to him based upon his conclusions on how this conversation could or could not go. So he had to be methodical and analytical about that. Also, before he called 911, he removed all his property from his hotel room. He knew he was going to jail. He didn't have a delusion of where he was at. He knew exactly where his room was at. He didn't go and walk to the corner store and say, hey, give me my clothes. He went up to his room. He knew exactly where he was at. He then went down to his car and placed those clothes in the car. He wasn't having a delusion. He knew exactly where his car was located at. He knew where his phone was located at. He didn't go down and take his clothes and just throw them on the ground. He didn't throw them at the front desk and say, here are your clothes back. He was not having a delusion. He was told to say that. Very convenient for him to admit to killing Samantha Wall, and then conveniently, I was having a delusion because I took the wrong dosage. And my psychiatrist told me that that's a possibility. Where's the psychiatrist? We've heard from every expert that they could bring to try to substantiate what they wanted to put forth as their theory. Where's the psychiatrist? Where's an expert that can testify that, yes, he was taking this particular medication, and these are some of the side effects, or could be a side effect of his medication for him to admit to murder? No. Just like he was analytical and thinking about whether or not he brought the right attire to Kalamazoo, he thought about the murder. He relived the murder in his mind, and he relived it. He knew exactly what he did. He knew exactly what he did. And that's why he told the police, I'm in trouble. Because he knew exactly where he was at. He knew exactly who he just called. And he knew exactly who he was speaking to when he said he is in trouble. Then when he was taken to the police station, he knew exactly where he was at. The officer came in and told him, do you know why you're here? And what's going on? He said, yes, I'm being detained. Do you know why? Yes. The officer said, good, as long as you know. Now, he didn't think he was at the zoo. He didn't think he was at home in his bed. He wasn't having a delusion on where he was at. He knew exactly where he was at and why he was there based upon his statements to the police. He was worried about his job. He was in that delusion. He knew he had a job. He knew he had a job that he could lose and probably would lose based upon what he just admitted to the police. Now, the police, they didn't badger him. They didn't ask any additional questions. So we have no more follow-up. We don't have an interrogation. He wasn't interrogated. He said he wanted to talk to his lawyer, even though he didn't know who his lawyer was, so that the police didn't ask him any more questions. Even though he said, quote unquote, I'm trying to be helpful. You're trying to be helpful? Why don't we have a subsequent interview after you being arrested? Because his lawyer swooped in, and his lawyer said, don't say anything. He had a delusion, and they bought it. You had a delusion to make you say you did something that you know, that quote unquote, that you know you didn't do? When has that ever happened? He said it never happened before. He's never convinced himself that he allegedly did something that didn't happen. No, absolutely not. He knew exactly what happened. And he knew he was going to lose his job. And he told his parents to say that he was not in jail, but that he was having a mental breakdown. Lied to them. Even though he was trying to be helpful. Now, they want to say that, oh, this is a seatbelt cutter. This is a knife. This is a knife. It's a blade. Now, why wasn't this blade submitted to forensic tech Sekadat in order for her to do her trace analysis? Why wasn't the fibers even collected from this particular knife, let alone submitted to Sekadat in an attempt to see, A, whether or not the fibers that were contained in this knife actually could match the fibers that were removed from Samantha Wall's clothes? Why wasn't this particular knife submitted to forensic tech Sekadat in an attempt to see whether or not this particular knife could have caused some of the wounds or some of the cuts on Samantha Wall's clothes? Why wasn't this particular knife submitted to forensic tech Sekadat? This is a characteristic knife. It has a straight edge, a single edge, which could be consistent with the cuts to Samantha Wall's clothing. But we don't know because it was never submitted. But they want you guys to think they did a thorough investigation. No stone is left unturned. This knife was never submitted. We have multiple pictures of Samantha Wall throughout Jeff Hersman's apartment. Now, we saw inside of Samantha Wall's apartment, and you will be able to see from exhibit number 10, the pictures of her wall. Not one picture of Jeff Hersman. Not one picture of Samantha Wall and Jeff Hersman. Jeff Hersman goes from room to room being reminded of Samantha Wall, looking at these pictures. We don't know what's on the back of these pictures. I mean, I'm not suggesting that there is, but could be some language on the back of the pictures. A plethora of prescription medication that who knows what the results of what combination he was taking. We have a bag of whatever type of pills that's not in the prescription, that's technically illegal to have pills out of their prescription bottle. This wasn't analyzed. We don't know what type of pills those are. We have mushrooms that he's taking in combination with a plethora of prescription medication. We have a bike that we know Mr. Hersman is an avid bicyclist. Why wasn't this bike analyzed? Why wasn't it a closer picture of this bike? Did they even know Jeff Hersman rode a bike? Why do I have to flush these out? Do we know what Jeff Hersman was wearing on the day of October 21st? No. He indicated he went to the synagogue. Why wasn't anybody interviewed from the synagogue to see what he had? Why wasn't video extracted from the synagogue to see if Jeff Hersman was even there and what he was wearing? Detective Sanchez indicated, had he known what Jeff Hersman was wearing, then yes, they would have went and tried to locate that same clothing from his house and analyzed it. And why did they know what he was wearing? Because it was not a thorough investigation. Stones were left unturned. Now, as far as his location, where was Brian Tosis at with his nice map to show that, oh, we know that he was at this particular location? Where was Sarah Markle at to say, oh, I analyzed his phone and these are his phone records that would indicate he was listening to a podcast? Where's that evidence? He was listening to a podcast that night. Convenient. Now, his phone may very well have been tuned to a podcast, but he was in there listening to it. But yet we don't have that information at all, even though they spent all of this time trying to convince us that Jeff Hersman didn't do the murder. He put on his defense hat and he went to work to try to convince us that Jeff Hersman could not have done it simply because his phone wasn't there? Is that it? Because your phone is not there? We heard from Sergeant Martinez, who indicated in his search warrant affidavit, he even stated that individuals leave their phones at home in order to detect their phone being located prior to committing a crime. We have gloves. They try to make fun of the fact that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos said he had a seatbelt cutter, but they didn't make any mention. They didn't ask any questions about Jeff Hersman's seatbelt cutter, a lead seatbelt cutter. I don't know if during their preparation, the prosecutor, his attorney, and him, during their preparation, maybe that was not brought up. But Jeff Hersman did testify, and it was obvious that he was giving suggestions on what to say. Not just the truth. Say these things. Say you were delusional. Say you don't remember. Say whatever you do, don't say the truth that you killed her. Don't say what you already told the police. They gave him use immunity. And what is use immunity? Use immunity means that no statement that he states on the stand can be used against him. He has immunity against that. So if he got on the stand and said, yes, I did kill her, I want to finally come clean and clear my conscience, they would not be able to use that statement against him. But why not give him transactional immunity? If you really believe he's so innocent, why not give him transactional immunity, which means that we cannot prosecute you at all during this case for the death of Samantha Wall, period. And you know why? Because I think they deep down may have had some reservations on how sincere Mr. Hersman was when he tried to recant his statement.
Like, why would somebody admit to something they didn't do? And this was, the search of his house was done on November the 8th, weeks after the death of Samantha Wall. He could dispose of whatever type of evidence he had. Burnt it, threw it in the trash, drove up to Kalamazoo and threw it on the dump. I mean, he could have did anything with it. They didn't search his house then, on the day afterwards, and they'd be like, oh, we didn't have any probable cause. He had individuals who testified or told the law enforcement that he was depressed and he was not all the way there mentally, and they had concerns about Jeff Hersman's mental status. Police officer Allison Baker stated, Jeff Hersman said, I killed her. Despite the prosecution trying to, I guess, somewhat impeach her, she told the truth. Now, I can't say the same for all of their witnesses, or even most of their witnesses, but she was honest and she told the truth despite. She didn't have to look at the prosecutor for approval and see if he was shaking his head like, yeah, say this, or shaking their head. We saw that. We saw the prosecution shaking their head throughout this particular trial, where witnesses are testifying, trying to signal to the witnesses on how to testify. Similarly, when Jeff Hersman was testifying, kept looking to the prosecutor, kept looking to his attorney in the back row, looking for approval on what to say, not just answering the questions. And then when confronted, what did he say? You got me. No, I'm not trying to get you. I'm trying to get the truth. We're trying to get to the truth. My job is not to get you. That's the police's job, to investigate who did this and come to a conclusion. And if the evidence shows, which I believe it does, that you had some type of involvement with it, then they arrest you, and then they charge you, and then you go to court and fight for your rights. Now, Aaron Pergament testified, lied about having a key, lied about being sexually active. There was some type of mention that at one point in time he was a stalker. Now, Sergeant Martinez testified that he felt that Aaron Pergament lied to Officer Crenshaw when Aaron Pergament said he did not have a key to Samantha Wall's apartment. Put that in his search warrant. He testified to that. Now, Aaron Pergament knew that there was a criminal investigation being conducted. Why wasn't Aaron Pergament charged with lying to a peace officer when they had proof of it, had text messages? Stockmeyer tried to walk it back and say, oh, it's probable cause, but not this or that, or I don't recall, or just didn't want to tell the truth of the matter. And I think that Sergeant Martinez stated the truth. Even though he did not take pictures of the inside of Jeff Hersman, he was truthful about that. He didn't take pictures. He was truthful about he didn't thoroughly examine it. Now, the ADT Jesse Conwell testified that at least 2 minutes for the system to go into idle mode, stated that the motion at 4:20 a.m. had to be brief in order for the system to then go into idle mode at 4:22. We know that there was motion that was detected at 12:32 in the a.m., and from 12:32 to 1:24, there had to be constant motion because the system never went into idle mode for this period of time. For almost an hour, there was constant motion. They also indicated that, for the prosecutor, they stated that, oh, if she was on the couch, the system wouldn't detect it. So therefore, the system would go into motion from 12:32 to 1:24. There had to be some type of constant motion between 12:32 and 1:24 to prohibit the system to going into motion. And then the system goes into idle mode at 1:24. Dr. Kroon, she testified. Now, some of her testimony was a little bit disingenuous, and I'm going to tell you why. Because
For one, in her autopsy, which you'll get a copy of that, she did not document the depths of the wounds. She also did not indicate the smaller arteries or vessels were severed at all. Why is that important? She testified on June 13th, the same day after Dr. Dragovich provided his report. Now, of course, both sides had to get an opportunity to look at these reports. The prosecution then looks at this report, sees the deficiencies in her autopsy, and tries to rehabilitate her on the stand by asking poignant questions, which Dr. Dragovich points out in his report about what she didn't do. So he then asks her the depths of the wounds on the stand, and she just makes up these numbers. She just makes up these numbers. They weren't documented, they weren't measured, but in an attempt to show or try to prove and mislead you guys that she did a thorough investigation or a thorough autopsy, she just says these numbers. She also has nowhere in the autopsy report that's any indication that there was any arteries or vessels that were severed at all. That was also in the report. That question was asked, trying to rehabilitate her. No defensive wounds. Also stated that these bruises could have came from punches. She has a bloody nose. Why does she have a bloody nose? Why is there blood in her nose? Did she get hit in the nose? According to the autopsy, we don't know because it was not thorough. Bruises on the side of her head. The prosecutor wants to say that this was a terminal fall, but she got bruises all over her body. Also, we have evidence of a struggle prior to the bloodletting in the living room. How do you get bruises on the inside of your arm? Is that conducive with somebody trying to grab your arm? To try to control your arm? Is it? More bruising. More bruising. She got bruises all on her body. Now, this particular image is rather important because, for one, this would suggest that somebody was over her, on top of her, to strike her in the back of the head, I believe she was stabbed first in the throat, stabbed 3 times in the neck. She then fell down or bent down on her knees. Somebody then came over top of her to hit her in the back of the head. This is a crime of passion. She wasn't a threat at that particular time. Somebody had the distinct intent to murder her, to stab her in the back of the head, to stab her in the back of the neck. Dr. Dragovich indicated that these wounds would indicate that there could be a loss of consciousness and then a later possible regaining of that consciousness. He stated that she had an incomplete autopsy. Autopsy report did not make any mention of whatsoever that there was a severance of any major blood levels, could mean that that person could survive for hours. There was no indication of what was the final thing that killed her at what particular or when that could have happened. Based upon his reading of the autopsy, he could say that it's very possible that she could have been stabbed, assaulted much earlier, lost consciousness in the hallway, in the pool of blood, and then regained consciousness some time later, triggered the motion, and then went outside. No wounds that were indicated as far as their deaths. Stab wound to the back of the head possibly resulted in a loss of consciousness. Failed to document whether or not there was any compromise to the respiratory system with an analysis of the lung tissue sampling, but did note that there was hemoaspiration. But also noted that the respiratory system was unremarkable, which means normal. That's a contradiction. Like, which one is it? The toxicologist indicated that, yes, she had GHB. And GHB is a substance that could be found in all of us. But she also indicated that GHB has a half-life of 30 to 50 minutes. If she were to inject GHB, say around 12:30, 1 o'clock, and she died at 4 o'clock, that would give some opportunity for her body to metabolize. Now, I'm not saying I know 100% that somebody gave her a Mickey, but these are questions that we have to ask. And she also indicated that based upon the substances that are in her body, it could lower her blood pressure, which could lead out to a lower rate of which somebody bled out. Now, this is the inside of Samantha's car. What substance is this in the cup? Is this blood? Is it suspected blood? I don't know. Was it analyzed? We don't know. We have no evidence that suggests that this has ever been analyzed. Now, Detective Sanchez indicated that if it was, he would have known about it, but he didn't even know what forensic tech even did the analysis at all. And then the prosecution wants to suggest that us as the defense, we could have had this car processed with our own experts. We could have, like it's our job. We have to process the scene. We have to send people to the scene to process her car and her apartment to see whether or not this is suspected blood. No, this is their job. Why wasn't this particular substance analyzed to see what it was? Is that GHB? I don't know. It's something inside of a cup, inside of the car. We have other cups. Did she have a rider in the car? Was somebody else in the car? We don't know. Was these cups analyzed for any traces of DNA inside of the cup? We do not know. We have no pictures whatsoever of outside of the car. Now, Special Agent Bowers, he testified about telling the story. He likes to tell the story. But in order to tell the story, you must go from its original nature of the story. The original nature of the story was her purse, her keys, plain view when you walk inside the house. The edited story is the purse is then moved to the kitchen table. So when he gets there, he's looking at a totally different story than the original story. The original story was this purse was in this particular location. Nothing was taken. Obviously, things are of value in plain view. Laptops, wallets, car keys, credit cards, money. If this was a robbery, this would have not been in this picture. It would have been taken. They want to suggest that Michel Jackson-Bolanos is such an opportunity that he doesn't pass up any type of opportunity to take anything. But you don't take somebody's purse. You don't take their car keys. You don't take laptops. You don't take money. You don't take credit cards. You take these things if this is a robbery. So the story that this is telling me is this is not a robbery. Whoever came to do this, Samantha Wall, had no intention whatsoever to rob her. They didn't come to rob her. They came to kill her. Drawers unransacked. If somebody's coming to your house to do an armed robbery, they are ransacking that place. There's nothing that's not going to be left. That table will be empty. Those drawers will be pulled inside out. The TV would be gone. There would be some type of documentation or some type of evidence that would suggest that somebody was ransacking this place, and it's none. The only type of things that it suggests is that it was some type of struggle. That's the only evidence that shows things being knocked around. They suggest there was a struggle, not somebody trying to ransack the place, snoop through the place, see what they can find to steal. Detective Marco. She stated that our phones show us everything. Cellbrite gives us information on what's in your phone. We have Mr. Jackson-Bolanos' phone on the left. What do we notice that's similar to Samantha Wall's phone? Mr. Jackson-Bolanos has his location services enabled, Find My iPhone enabled, and for those who don't know or have an iPhone, in order to find your iPhone, you must have your location enabled, and that's a feature. If you lose your iPhone, it will give you on the map where your phone was last located, as far as a GPS coordinate in a dot. Not a time-advanced phone record, which is not as thorough as a GPS location. We have Samantha Wall's GPS location. And why do we have Samantha Wall's GPS location? Because her phone location services were enabled. Her Find My iPhone was enabled. Why don't we have Mr. Jackson-Bolanos? They both had an iPhone. They both had their location enabled. Why don't we have any GPS for Mr. Jackson-Bolanos at all? We just have time-advanced records that place them in the location. But we can place hers exactly where her phone was at. Even though nobody took the time to input these particular coordinates and give it to you on the map, because they love their maps. They had multiple maps through the course of this particular trial. Why wouldn't they map this? This is a different variable. Now, the prosecutor wants to suggest that, oh, the phone could be in the same place and not moving and have a different location. These are device lock status. The device was unlocked, locked, unlocked at a particular time. What's happening on this phone at these particular times? We look at her hands. Her hands are covered in blood. If she got attacked at 1:24 or around that particular time, and she had blood on her hands, she would not be able to operate her phone efficiently. This looks like it's blood stains on the screen. What are those stains on the front of the screen? What are those stains on the front of the screen? And if any of us have ever tried to operate our phone with water on our hands, lotion on our hands, or any type of wet item on our hands, it makes it sometimes impossible to utilize the phone in the fashion we would want to. Her camera comes on at 1:24. Was this an accident? Did she try to unlock her phone and accidentally put her camera on? The camera doesn't have an end time. So was the camera just on in the background? Was the camera just on? When the police got there, was the camera on? Because the camera never closed down. She operated the camera, which I believe was a mistake on trying to unlock the phone, and the camera never ended. Now, Detective Marco also testified to that she searched Aaron Pergamon's and Jeff Hersman's phone. And in her opinion, there was nothing incriminating. Then when I asked her about Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, whether or not, like, you didn't find anything incriminating on his phone, she was like, oh, well, that is a subjective opinion. I can't give you my, but you gave your subjective opinion when he asked you. Just didn't want to be truthful. Just want to steer this particular investigation in this particular trial on what the prosecutor wants, not being honest. She also stated that she remembers looking in the paper around the time that allegedly Jeff Hersman was released from jail. She said she vividly remembers this. And then she was shown a newspaper article and said that refreshed her memory of when it happened. And then tried to suggest that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos had an attempt to do a same-day passport to flee the country? That's absurd. Guy Nutter, he indicated that he did not collect shoe impressions because the police basically tainted the scene. It was so much traffic in and out of this particular scene that he didn't collect any type of shoe prints. Is this a shoe print? Circle?
Looks like one to me. Tony Grocery. Now, she stated that this jacket was quote-unquote water resistant, even though nowhere in her report that she indicated this, but she just conveniently gets on the day of trial and says that, oh, I sprayed some luminol on there, and therefore I determined that this jacket has some type of water-resistant qualities. What about the rest of his clothes? What about the hood that they took? What about his face garment that they had? What about his pants? What about his shoes? What about every other piece of garment? Were those also water resistant? Why was any traces of blood on there? And obviously, this particular garment had to have some type of capability to have and absorb the blood, because they state, even though we can't see it with our naked eye, even though multiple people testified that they couldn't see this blood with the naked eye, but they said the blood was there. So obviously, this particular garment had to have some type of saturation. So it can't be 100% waterproof or resistant. We show markings on it right now. They're able to draw on this particular jacket. Obviously, this jacket had the type of material of which somebody could illustrate some drawings, some markings on there, and some type of absorbing on the sleeve of blood. Then we had Joni Johnson. Now, I believe the blood tells the story in this particular case. We already know that there's evidence of a struggle in the kitchen. This is where it started at, in the kitchen. Samantha Wall was not in the living room where this altercation started. Now, she may have ran to the living room in an attempt to maybe get her phone and being followed and pursued. This is the living room. What does their own experts say? The saturation and transfer stains of the living room rug and pillows indicated a blood-bearing object contacted these items following the bloodshed event. So what does that mean? That means there was a blood-shedding event. Blood left Samantha Wall's body, and then there was a transfer to the rug and pillow after, which would substantiate what Virginia Tech Surgeon said, that it's a possible struggle inside of the living room because the blood happened first and then the pillow fell on top of the blood. The drip stains on the living room rug, couch, and footrest indicated a blood source moved through these areas. Pillows and blankets were observed on top of the sum of the blood staining on living room rug, indicating these objects were moved following the start of the bloodletting event. It was a tussle. This was a tussle inside of the living room. Pillows were being moved around, rugs were being moved around, blankets were being moved around after the bloodletting event, i.e. her stabbing, occurred. A trace footwear analysis was performed on a yellow pillow from the living room, trace item 60. The result of that analysis can be found in trace record 26. Where is record 26? There was an analysis of the pillow, of the footprint, that was recorded in a record. Did we hear anything about record 26? Did we hear about anything about an analysis of any type of footprint? We definitely know that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos' shoes were seized and recovered from his house. I can guarantee you his shoes were used in this analysis. Anyone tell you that? And had his shoes matched this particular outline on this pillow, they would have had somebody sitting in that seat emitting record 26 as exhibit 125, and they would have published record 26, the findings of this particular shoe contributed to these particular stains on the living room pillows. But we didn't hear that. because it did not match their theory. Not about the truth with them. We also heard from Joni Johnson, who indicated the projected pattern on the bathroom door indicated blood was ejected under pressure onto this area, which occurs with some wounds to the neck that include breaches to the circulatory system. So based upon their expert, there was some type of breach to the circulatory system that would have projected blood out. If somebody's stabbing somebody in the neck, blood will be projected onto them. Not just the wall. They want you to believe that, oh, this projection happened after, quote unquote, Michel Jackson-Bolanos left the apartment when he was down that Greektown. Then she started projecting blood. No. Pressure. Once pressure is penetrated, then that blood immediately comes out. And that blood would have came out and it would have touched and went on whoever committed this particular murder. It would have been on their pants. It would have been on their coat. It would have been on their shoes also. Also, when the person was down being stabbed in the head, their blood would have been projecting onto their shoes. Their blood would have been projecting onto whoever did this, their pants. Because their head is down at that time. That's the only way you can stab somebody in the back of the head. That's the only way you can stab somebody in the back of the neck. They have to have their head down and you're over them, stabbing them in a crime of passion. Meanwhile, blood is projecting onto the person's shoes, pants, and all types of garments. A pool that has been altered were on the hallway floor. This indicated a blood source was in this area for a time and actively bleeding. They want you to believe that Michel Jackson-Bolanos went in there, stabbed her 3 times in the side of the neck, 1 time in the front of the neck, 2 times in the back of the head, 1 time in the back of the neck, changing positions, getting over her, changing positions, tussling with her. And then he walks out, and then she walks out right after? She stumbles out right? No, she fell in the hallway. She lost consciousness, and she accumulated a pool of blood in the hallway. Their own experts said that this had to be some time. Now, she didn't know exactly how long. Why didn't he ask her those questions? Why wouldn't he ask her those questions? How long do you think the body, because it does not fit his narrative. It does not fit his narrative. That is a very common sense question to ask somebody when you're looking at this pool of blood. When I first saw the evidence, way before this trial even started, I was able to look, and I'm no expert, but you can look at this hallway and see that somebody had to be laying in this pool of blood for an extended amount of time in order for that blood to be accumulated at that amount. And this altering, what does she say an altering could be? Moving throughout the blood. Somebody laying in the blood and trying to get up. Their legs is moving. They're semi-conscious, a.k.a. what Dr. Dragovich said. Could have been regaining consciousness. These are her pants. Her pants are saturated in blood. She never got stabbed in the leg. Why would her pants be saturated in blood? Because she was laying in the pool of blood for an extended amount of time prior to getting up. This is Samantha getting up. This is Samantha. This is the story that the blood is telling us. Samantha is getting up. Transfer stains. Swipes. We asked a very specific question to Joni Johnson, who indicated these could be conducive of somebody who is laying in the hallway, using the wall as a brace to get up after being in the hallway for an extended amount of time. That's exactly what happened. She was laying in the hallway for an extended amount of time, maybe a couple of hours, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then she rose up. She gained her consciousness. She used the wall to get up. Got fingerprints on the wall, transfer stains, swipes on the wall, all conducive with somebody trying to get up. More fingerprints. using the wall to brace herself. She stated we have footprints going in both directions. This is important because after she got up from laying in the hallway, she triggered that motion. She got up, walked towards the back. She probably didn't have all her senses with her. She just got stabbed multiple times. She was just unconscious for multiple hours. She lost a great deal of blood, but she was a fighter. Samantha Woll was a fighter. We heard that. Paul Spurgeon testified to that. She's a fighter. She had that fighter spirit. And the last bit of energy, she woke up, tried to maybe look for her phone, could not find her phone at that time, and said that I need to go outside. I need to go outside to try to make it to my neighbor's house. We have transfer stains on the exterior of the door. We know the door was open, right? Per Officer Dow's body cam, we know the door was open. So whoever did this attempted to shut the door behind them. After they did this to Samantha Wall, they attempted to shut the door. That's why there's transfer on the outside of the exterior doorknob. That's why there's transfer stains on the exterior of the deadbolt. And there's also transfer stains on the interior. So when that person left around 1:30-ish or 1:20-ish, closed the door behind them, Samantha Wall had to at least pull the door. Maybe the door did not close all the way. Do we know whether or not the door gets stuck? Because we heard that she has a habit of sometimes leaving her door open. Is that because sometimes she thinks she's closing it and it doesn't close all the way? We heard from Mr. Cronwell, who indicated that the door could be, what did he say, 1 inch, 1.5 inches, or 1 inch, and it appears closed, but the sensor will say that the door was still open? Her door wasn't wide open. She would never leave. She would come home at 12:30 and just leave her door wide open for the whole world to see. She probably thought she closed her door. Nobody tested her door to see whether or not, if we look at Q3, whether or not this door jamb of her door is not flush enough for the door to close. We've all probably encountered doors before where some doors take a little bit more force to close. Some doors you can just close and they close because there's enough room between the actual door and the door jamb. Some doors rub against the door jamb. Why wasn't this done? Why wasn't the analysis done? If they say that her door was open, why wouldn't any of the detectives ever go to the house and analyze what type of force it takes to close her door? Did she intend to close her door and just did not do that? Nevertheless, if you look at Q5, she had to at least pull the door open somewhat to leave this particular house because she cannot walk through doors. She then had to, somebody had blood on their hands when they touched the interior of the storm door. Also, when they touched the actual screen to the screen door. She was then found outside. Saturation stains around her neck. Saturation stains in her hair. I believe Joni Johnson also indicated that if somebody were to try to check her pulse, could blood be transferred from her onto their clothes? That's exactly what happened. The prosecution wants to make it so far-fetched for somebody to try to check somebody's pulse, lean over them, check somebody's pulse, and you see her hair covered in blood, and for their back of their sleeve to rub against her hair? Why isn't there blood anywhere else? Why isn't there blood all in the front of him? Why is there only blood on the sleeve of his arm, on the arm he touched her with? Where's the rest of the blood? That's not a coincidence that there's no blood anywhere else on any of his clothes. That's not a coincidence. The reason is because he did not kill Samantha Wall. Brian Tosis testified that all he can say is, oh, Mr. Jackson-Bolanos was in this particular area. He was in this particular area
around this particular time. He never denied that. Not once did Mr. Jackson-Bolanos ever say, hey, I was not in these areas. He admitted he was downtown. Now, can he remember every single area he walked to? Probably not, because he went to a lot of different areas. He went to a lot of different apartment structures. Did he ever go in any of buildings? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Now, where is the time advance records for Aaron Pergamon? Where is the time advance records for Jeff Hersman? All we have is time advance for Mr. Jackson-Bolanos. But they did such a thorough investigation. We didn't see it, even though they spent half of their time playing defense lawyer, criminal defense lawyer, defending Mr. Hersman. Trooper Alex Martinez, like I stated earlier, he testified, somewhat truthfully, I believe, that, in fact, he believed that Mr. Pergamon was lying about having a key, even though Mr. Pergamon was not charged, with lying to a police officer. He also indicated in his search warrant that people leave their phones at home. Of course they leave it, especially if you're trying to outsmart somebody, especially if you've got an analytical mind and you're trying to outsmart people, you're going to leave your phone at home. Everybody knows in 2023, 2024, that your phone can be located to a particular scene of the crime. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. Brett Foreman sure knows that. He testified, and I'm not suggesting Brett Foreman did the killing, but just that type of mentality that the police wouldn't, I guess, look a little closer on. Now, in regards to Brett Foreman, I mean, I think it's kind of odd for you to say, hey, if I would have did this, if this is your friend who was murdered, and then you start to hypothesize and say, hey, if I was the killer, I would have went to the movies, and I would have bought a movie ticket with my credit card, and I would have left my phone at the movie theater so my phone wouldn't be detected. That type of mentality, that's not just lost on Brett Foreman. Jeff Hersman has that same type of mentality. Has that same type of mentality on how to get away with murder. Now, they say they had all these cameras. Where are the cameras at? Of his streets. They had no cameras whatsoever. They had no video footage whatsoever of whether or not these ring cameras or cameras would even pick Jeff Hersman leaving his location. And if he's trying to outsmart somebody, would he just walk out the front door and turn on his porch light and walk out? No, he would probably go through the back door. Did they check that? Did they check any houses around the back doors? No, not at all. And they were also looking for license plate readers. So if he doesn't drive his car, then he's not detected at all. If he rides a bike, then he's not detected. Sergeant Sanchez indicated, Lieutenant Sergeant Sanchez, I'm sorry, indicated that he looked around 4:20, around that time, for individuals riding the bike. But you didn't look for individuals riding the bike around 1:20, 1 o'clock? Then we have video surveillance. Sergeant Lash Sullivan. We have video footage of Mr. Jackson-Bolanos avoiding confrontation. We have individuals on the top of the screen who's walking out. Mr. Jackson-Bolanos did not know whether or not these individuals knew he was breaking in the car. He avoids the confrontation. He walks away and he hides. He's hiding. He's not confronting people. He's getting away from people. He doesn't want a confrontation. After he takes some time of hiding, he then emerges. He's walking back. He gets nervous. He sees a car.
He attempts to avoid confrontation. Doesn't know whether or not these individuals were the ones who were walking. He doesn't know whether or not he was seen going into cars. He's avoiding confrontation. After he jumps down from this wall, where he said his glove was somewhat torn. He tore his glove jumping down from the wall, not jumping up. He said jumping down. The prosecutor wanted to mischaracterize and mislead his testimony. He said when he jumped down, he's starting to run. He's running. He's avoiding confrontation. He said he's seen multiple different security throughout multiple different structures, and he ran. He runs from them. Here we have Mr. Jackson-Bolanos again, running. Avoiding confrontation. Looking over his shoulder. He's avoiding confrontation. The prosecutor wants you to believe that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos went inside Samantha Wall's apartment at 4:20. I don't know, they just keep trying to gloss over the struggle inside the kitchen because it doesn't make sense. It's literally impossible for all that stuff to happen in the time frame that they say it happened at. So Mr. Jackson-Bolanos allegedly comes inside, I guess confronts her inside of the kitchen. How would she get to the kitchen, though? She would have to have some type of motion to get to the kitchen. Because that's where the altercation started at, inside of the kitchen. Multiple of their own witnesses said that there was suspected struggle inside of the kitchen because of the fruit and the fruit bowl that was knocked over. So whoever did this, the altercation started in the kitchen. So how would Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, who we never saw walking towards her apartment, and they want you to believe that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos just stabbed some tires? Like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, he didn't do any type of breaking into cars as far as breaking the window. He hit some handles. Yes, he did. He opened car doors. If the door was locked, he moved on. He didn't use any type of breaking as far as breaking the window, picking the locks, anything of that sort. They had no type of evidence or reports, the police, that any cars' windows were broken into on that particular night, even though Ms. Grady testified that her car windows had been broken into before. Multiple times her car windows been broken into. We didn't get one report that whole night from any of these apartment complexes, which they know where he was at, that anybody's windows were broken into. Especially not any tires were slashed. That doesn't even make sense. Were they just trying to say he was just a slasher? He's Jason? He's Freddy? Say he was just in a slashing mood? Say that he was practicing? That's absurd. Say he was practicing to see if the knife is sharp enough. So he's saying that, oh, I'm about to go into somebody's house that I don't know they're in there, because he's saying that Samantha surprised him. So if the person doesn't know that an individual is in a house, why would they practice stabbing some tires to see if their knife was sharp enough to kill somebody? That just doesn't even make sense. That just defies all logic and common sense, that particular theory. It just doesn't make any sense at all. So there was motion at 4:20, which we know is Samantha Wall in her last attempt to leave the apartment. But however, they want you to believe that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos came in there at 4:20, tussled with her, hit her a couple of times, stabbed her twice in the neck, in the front of the neck, 3 times in the side of the neck, twice in the top of the head, once in the back of the head, in the back of the neck, all in what? 20 seconds, 10 seconds? Their own witness said that this activity had to be brief from 4:20 in order for the system to go into idle mode at 4:22. It had to be brief. Can't do all of this. And then
They saying he's a thief. He's an opportunity. He's so desperate. He's so desperate for money. But you see all these things of value and you don't take it after you just allegedly committed a murder? You don't take things of value? You don't take a purse? You don't take a wallet? You don't take a laptop? You don't take car keys? You don't at least open the door? There's nobody in there. There's no evidence whatsoever that from the outside you will be able to see her door open. Then they show you with the light on. So they want you to believe that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, who's been avoiding confrontation all night, is going to walk into an apartment with the light on at 4:20? He didn't touch any door handle of any apartment. No, none at all. There's no surveillance whatsoever that suggests that he even walked up to any window and peered in and looked in. Touched nothing except door handles of cars. And I'm not trying to say that what he did was right. We're not saying that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos is an angel. But what he's not a murderer. He's not a home invader. Those are two different things. Now, they're trying to stretch it and say, oh, a person who will go into your car will go into your house and stab you? That's a crime of passion. If a person who's a petty thief, which he's being a petty thief, goes into a house and sees somebody, he runs. He runs the opposite direction. He doesn't run towards them and start to stab them. He doesn't run towards them. He runs away, which is consistent with what Mr. Jackson-Bolanos has been doing that entire night, running away from people. Running away from people. Not running towards them in an attempt to assault them? For what? To go and break somebody's house, to assault them for what? Just to kill them and not take anything? To not ransack? To look for anything? What purpose would that be? And then he's walking. He's walking. He's walking towards people. Surely he would have been, after the projection of blood and all that blood, he would have had blood on him. He's walking towards individuals. He could have walked the other side of the service drive, walked down the grass and stayed in the shadows. Obviously he knows people are outside. He's walking right by them. They would notice somebody covered in blood at 4:20 in the morning, 4:23 in the morning. They would notice that. That would pique your curiosity. That's something you would not forget. Nobody else is out there who's walking. They're striking. They don't even bat an eye. They don't even turn their head. They don't even notice him. Had he been covered in blood, hadn't he had blood on him, he's not wiping his face. He doesn't have blood on him. And just like Sullivan stated, they blew this picture up to 1,000% to see if they could have any traces of blood on Mr. Jackson-Bolanos. They analyzed that, super analyzed that. They had the FBI, they had Michigan State Police, they had Detroit Police. You don't think they analyzed that? We know they did because Sullivan said they blew that picture up to the most that they could, and there was no evidence to suggest whatsoever that he had a trace of blood that's visible. Only a little trace on his arm for touching her. Zoom in. And this is me zooming in on a PC. Like, I don't have any special capabilities. He walked right past the casino. Who would commit a murder and walk past the casino? Everybody knows the casino has 4K cameras. Their cameras are top-notch, high quality. And not to mention people striking out there. And then you walk by all these known places that have cameras, 36th District Court. You're not standing in the shadow. He's consistently walking on the public street. Because at that point in time, like he's testified, he wasn't doing anything wrong at that particular time. Now, he stated that he came across the body, which was truthful. Now, why he didn't tell Sergeant Ford? It's easy. Sergeant Ford implying that they had his phone going past the threshold. So in your mind, you know you're out there doing wrong. You're already a thief. They already labeled you as a criminal. And then they're trying to imply that you went into somebody's house. They're trying to say that they have evidence of you going into somebody's house. Of course that'll put you on the defensive. What are you going to say? I shot her? What are you going to say? I killed her, I raped her. That's what be going through somebody's mind. If you're implying that I went into her house on somebody I know I seen outside, if I tell you like I touched her, or you're like, yeah, I know you touched her, because you went inside her house, and he'll be in the same position he is right now. He'll be in the same seat he is in right now. The same position he's in right now, had he told him. He's then walking. Obviously, his phone is illuminated. He's on his phone. He's texting somebody. And then he states that he looked at the blood on his hand. His hand felt sticky. He touched Samantha Wall. He looked at his hand. The prosecutor would say he looked at his arm. And he didn't. You can't even look at your arm like he didn't do all of that. He looked at his hand. His arm was extended because he looked at his hand. And he panicked, which is understanding. And then he starts to walk again. Now, Sullivan also stated that he did the compilation. He, in his opinion at first, this was Mr. Jackson-Bolanos. And then when confronted with it, he admitted, good catch. Now, the prosecutor may say this insignificant as far as, oh, out of all these hours, he got only 1 minute wrong as far as that. But I think that's significant because at another time at 1:53, after Mr. Jackson-Bolanos was walking down Rivard, the prosecutor's trying to insinuate that that was Mr. Jackson-Bolanos inside the apartments that's depicted on the Chrysler surveillance, the Chrysler school surveillance. And when I asked Sergeant Sullivan about it, he was saying, oh, I can't say that's him. Legally, I can't say that's him. And I'm like, you don't even know whether or not that person came checking on their car. That's their particular car that came out their apartment. No, I don't. I don't even know that. But then they're trying to insinuate that they know that that's Mr. Jackson-Bolanos. Even though he testified that he walked up Rivard, made a left on Lafayette, and hit some cars, and found a bag, and placed that bag in the bush. And we also know he has a history of doing things like that. Because when he climbed over the wall, Sergeant Ford even admitted he didn't have a bag. He stashed the bag in the bushes. He has a habit of stashing bags in the bushes and then going to an apartment structure and then going back to retrieve that bag. So when he did that with the bag on Lafayette, that wasn't out the ordinary. That was consistent on what his actions were that particular night. Now we got a person who's running from the scene. Why would this person be running from the scene around the time that there is no more motion inside of her apartment? Now, this individual appears to be wearing glasses. Looks like he has somewhat of a distinct haircut. What's that in his hand? Could it be a knife? We know Sergeant Sullivan stated that they did a geofence. It's where they look at all the cell phones in this particular area. They couldn't find a cell phone for this individual, which to suggest that this person didn't have a cell phone. Now, the prosecutor indicated that they had all the video from all this area. Where's the video of this person running to? Where does he run to? If you got all this video of the area, why don't you have this person where they ran to? Could this person be somebody who's testified? I don't know. Could be. Could it be Hersman? I don't know. It looks very similar to me. It looks very similar to me. This person running from the scene looks very similar to Jeff Hersman. Haircut, glasses, even the coat he's wearing looks very similar. Very similar indeed. Now, why don't we have the video of where this person ran to?
would this person just take off running from the scene at 124? Who was tasked with getting the video surveillance? Sullivan says Sergeant Ford. He said he knows Sergeant Ford was supposed to get the video surveillance from 1301 Orleans. He pointed the finger at Sergeant Ford. Like he knows he did it. Because Sergeant Sullivan said, oh, I wasn't supposed to do it. I wasn't supposed to get the decoder cut. Then when Sergeant Ford got on the stand, I asked him, did you get this video footage from 1301 Orleans, a.k.a. Lafayette Towers? And he said no. And I said, if Sergeant Sullivan testified that you were supposed to get the video from 1301 Orleans, would that be true? And he said no, he must be confused. So I guess we just don't get that video footage. Even though we got hours upon hours of Mr. Jackson-Bolanos walking around, taking candy from cars, filling with handles. We got all this footage, but we don't have no footage of somebody running from the scene at 124 around the same time that her ADT goes into item. Now, if she's trying to manipulate her phone and can't do it because her hands are covered with blood, which her phone looks like it's covered in blood, then it would show some activity on the phone. It could show in an unlocking of the phone. Then they said it was some text messages. The app came up. If the app came up, where are the messages? From somebody or to somebody? That could just been a mistake. That could have just been her fidgeting with her phone and her accidentally opening the app. Because if nobody's sending you a text message, why would you open the app? If you're not sending out a text message, why would you open the app up? The last text message was way prior to that. Then we had the interrogation. We had Sergeant Stephen Ford. Ford says that your whole body made it easy to track you. But then he states that this is not Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, which we know this is Mr. Jackson-Bolanos. Why did he say that? Could it be that he knew or heard the testimony that Sergeant Sullivan submitted when he admitted that he was wrong, and Sergeant Ford was afraid to look like he was wrong, so he prematurely said, oh, no, this is not Jackson-Bolanos. Then who is it then? They call somebody else Mr. Jackson-Bolanos that is not Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, and then they call Mr. Jackson-Bolanos somebody else. He also indicated that the individual who ran away from the scene, who was by the playground, which we all took a field trip to, that particular parking lot. We also looked to the east and saw this playground. This is where the person ran from. Then Sergeant Ford indicated that that particular area is not Lafayette Tower. He said it's the pavilion. The pavilion's in a whole different location. The pavilion's at the top of the screen. Now, if you don't even know the location of where this person ran to, how are you going to be able to extract the video if you don't know where he even ran to, which was obvious of anybody who went to the scene and looked at the video where this person would have ran to and what particular buildings you would want to go to try to extract the video. But we just don't have the video at all, and we don't never know where this person ran to. But we do have some type of indication of who the person is. Now, Sergeant Ford, in his interrogation of Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, which was totally different than Jeff Hirschman's interrogation, used deceit, telling him that we have you going past the threshold. We know you went inside her apartment. Repeatedly kept saying her. Repeatedly kept referring to her. And then when Mr. Jackson-Bolanos responds to it, what does he say?
I mean, this is just over and over again. We're going through this.
Right, and we're going through it. You guys are homicide, bro. I'm not in the same fucking field. Being these is totally different from a fucking homicide. Getting into a car, this is different, bro. I did not do no homicides. I don't know nobody. I didn't see nobody. Nothing, bro.
This happened over a month ago, so we've been working on this for a while, right?
Okay.
So we're having this conversation after we've been working this constantly.
Okay.
So even though the media wants their information now, we want to make sure we have the right person in front of us.
And I hope you guys get the right person, but this is not me, bro. I don't do that. I only fuck with cars, and I'm a music manager.
So even if that's true, even if what you're saying is true, you would have tripped over her.
I would have tripped over who? I didn't trip over nobody. There was nobody there. I only seen a white fucking car in yellow light. Why do you keep trying to go back to the same person, bro? I don't know nothing about this. You keep saying her. I don't know no her, no hims, no them, us.
Okay, listen. We're not saying word here. You would have tripped over our Bobby.
Now, was this Sergeant Ford's attempt to use deceitful tactics in order to, I guess, what he considers to garner the truth? Or was it just Sergeant Ford forgetting what he just said 10 seconds earlier in this particular interview? We had Patrick Lane, who originally started this interview with Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, who indicated that this particular interview or his inquiry was based upon some glasses that were pawned at a pawn shop. Now, if you're sitting in a police station and and detectives are interviewing you about some very expensive glasses, one could be like, hey, I didn't rob nobody to get these glasses, because especially if you have the knowledge of people get killed for these glasses. Anybody knows about Cartier glasses? People shoot individuals for these glasses. People rob people for these glasses. There's been a lot of death in this city alone for these glasses for years, for decades. People have been getting killed for these Cartier glasses since I was young. So if you're being questioned, of course you're like, hey, I didn't rob nobody for it. I found these glasses. And then they shift the interview to talk about cars. Didn't say what day, didn't say necessarily where, but we want to talk about some cars that being broken into. Mr. Jackson-Bolanos denied it. He did. The prosecution states that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos does not tell the truth unless he's confronted with evidence. And some of that could be true, because he did admit to it. He eventually did admit to it. But he also volunteered other evidence that they didn't have at the time, such as he take pictures of cars. He took a picture of that Challenger, which they didn't know about. They didn't have this phone distraction at that time, which he did take a picture of a car. He took a picture of one car that particular night. That was truthful. Sergeant Ford indicated that they have the technology to see where his phone was at. What does Mr. Jackson-Bolanos do? He voluntarily surrenders his phone. He says, take my phone. I'll give you the consent. You can look through my phone. I'll give you the consent. In an attempt to hopefully can be exonerated, I guess he was thinking that they have GPS, because he knows his location zone. He shares his location with his girlfriend. They share the location together. So if she can see where I'm at any given time, why can't the police see where he was at that particular time? Why can't they pinpoint his GPS coordinates at that particular time? Why they got to go like, oh, he was just in the area? Very convenient. Very convenient. Sergeant Lane, he didn't watch any videos before the interrogation. He had 10 minutes worth of information prior to the interrogation. Sergeant Ford indicated that, in fact, he provided Sergeant Lane those videos. So did Sergeant Lane just fail to watch them? To not do your homework prior to investigating and interrogating? Mr. Jackson-Bolanos also said that he held a gun before. He didn't know Samantha Wall was stabbed. He thought she might have been, because that's the #1 type of homicide in Detroit. It's a shooting. So he was like, hey, I didn't shoot nobody. I've held a gun before, but I've never shot. Detective Lane himself said that Had Mr. Jackson-Bolanos indicated, hey, I didn't stab her, then yes, that would have raised his suspicion because she was stabbed. Or had Samantha Wall been suffocated to death, and he's like, oh, I never choked nobody out. That would have raised suspicion because he, in fact, said he didn't do what the very cause of that particular individual's homicide would have been. But Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, he didn't know how she died. He didn't know what the particular cause of that particular death was. Was it a stabbing? Was it a shooting? He didn't know that. He was honest with that. Sergeant Ford put him on guard that he didn't want to have anything to do with this. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. He understood that who he was, where he was, and where he came from as far as his background. Sergeant Ford also said that himself, like, we know your background. We've done our homework on you. This is somewhat out the character. You must have been working with somebody. No, I'm not working with nobody as far as no homicide. Maybe I have been working with others for some cars, but not for no homicide. To go into somebody's house and commit a murder and stab them 8 times? And where she was stabbed at, this was very strategic. Somebody wanted to kill her. She wasn't stabbed by somebody who's scared, who's just swinging and would have stabbed in the arm, maybe stabbed in the leg, stabbed in the stomach. This was all for the neck. And then after somebody was on top of her, stabbed her some more times. This was deliberate. This was a deliberate act, a crime of passion. This was not some just, oh, I'm walking in and I stumble across somebody and I get scared and I'm going to run against them and then I'm going to stab them multiple times. Absolutely not. Then we had the now officer in charge, Lieutenant Sanchez, who indicated that he became the OIC 5 days before trial on June the 5th, 2024. Testified that he only collects clothing when there's visible smears and patterns of blood, even though Mr. Jackson-Bolanos was visible. He also indicated that if there's any type of contradiction between whether or not somebody touched the body, he may seize the clothes. We had a contradiction between Kevin Moore and Officer Dowd on whether or not that body was touched. Now, I'm not suggesting that Kevin Moore is the murderer, but to do a thorough analysis, especially for comparative reasons, and I guess maybe the prosecution wants to suggest, oh, us as defense, we could have went over to Kevin Moore's house and took his clothes and did our own independent analysis to determine whether or not he had blood on him. I guess they might come say that on everybody. Because they've already implied that, like, it's the defense's obligation to investigate and solve this case. Even though that picture looks like Jeff Hirschman, I think we may have. Where's the clothing of Jeff Hirschman? Like I stated, he indicated that had he known what Jeff Hirschman was wearing, he would have seized those clothes. Okay, how do you find out what he's wearing? You ask questions. You go interview people who at the synagogue and say, did you see Jeff on Friday? What was he wearing? He was wearing this? Okay, then we can go to his house and see if we find some similar clothing that match those descriptions. How else do we find out? We extract the video. He doesn't even know if there's video even at the synagogue. I'm pretty sure there probably is video at that synagogue, but they didn't take the time to pull that and extract that video because it didn't fit their narrative. Now, Jeff Hirschman, he was talking to his parents, and he also stated that, or was stated to him, that a friend of his, Martin or Marvin, he acted like he didn't know what I was talking about when I asked him, knows a judge, and that judge is working behind the scenes to get you released. We know judges sign warrants. Charges can't come forth unless the judge signs that warrant. Does Jeff Hirschman have powerful people? Obviously, it was indicated to him. There's a judge that they know that is being contacted while he's in jail. Then he's just released. No charges, no subsequent interview at all. Even though he's trying to help, no subsequent interview whatsoever after his confession. After he confessed to killing Samantha Wall, they treat him with kid gloves. They treat him like He just spilt his milk as a toddler? They don't get aggressive with him like, you just said this. No subsequent interview. He didn't talk to the police after that at all. That was his last conversation to the police. Now, Detective Stockmar indicated that he took his shoelaces off. Why did he do that? Was he about to commit suicide? Did he think about committing suicide because he was caught inside of in admitting to what he did? Sanchez also testified that Bolanos was in the parking lot at 4:20. How could he be in the parking lot and inside Samantha Wall's house at 4:20? Was that a slip of a tongue? I think not. Now, Stockmar was the old officer in charge through the majority of this case. When I asked her questions, I guess she forgot everything she learned from this case. We asked her a very pertinent question. Do you think it was important to gather or remember certain location information from the suspect who called 911 making admissions about killing someone? Answer, I don't recall. Like, you don't recall whether or not you think it's important in order for you to know the location of an individual who previously called 911 and said that he killed the victim? You wouldn't think that's important to know where that person was on the day of his murder. When you come to testify, you wouldn't think that's important. I don't recall. Obviously, she was coached. Obviously, she was told to say you don't recall. I asked her another question on how she felt about something, whether or not she thought it was important. I don't recall. I don't recall. She doesn't recall anything? You don't, as the officer in charge, you don't recall what you did as part of the investigation? And Lieutenant Sanchez only became the officer in charge on June 5th, 5 days before this trial? Now we're in this trial, and you're testifying, and you don't remember anything? Doesn't recall thinking it's important to investigate a stalker with no geolocation information during the time of the murder, who has the key to the home of the victim. She doesn't recall if that's important. Doesn't currently know whether she thinks it's important to investigate a stalker with no geolocation at all, who has the key to the home of the victim. Who had knowledge of her key? Obviously, her lockbox is empty. There's a key on the ground. Why is this key on the ground? We know that her personal key to the location was inside of her purse. This is not the key she uses. We heard from Sherry Berger, this is the key that she obtained from Samantha Woll when she visited. This is her spare key that she keeps in this lockbox. We also heard testimony that this particular lockbox was unlocked. The code was already entered into it. All they had to do was depress the particular latch, and obviously the lockbox came open, and it's empty. Now, when you go into your deliberation, you're going to get jury instructions. They want you guys to wrongfully convict Mr. Jackson-Bolanos of first-degree felony murder. They cannot meet any of their elements to this crime. Mr. Jackson-Bolanos did not cause the death of Samantha Wall at all. She died from stab wounds, yes, but not anything that was inflicted by Mr. Jackson-Bolanos. Mr. Jackson-Bolanos had no intent to kill, harm, assault, any type of unwanted touching to Samantha Wall. Nor did he ever go inside of Samantha Wall's house. There's not a shred of evidence that would suggest Mr. Jackson-Bolanos went inside her house. Contrary to that, it's evidence that he did not, based upon what he was doing that night, hitting handles, stealing candy, stealing backpacks. You're not going to steal a wallet? You're not going to steal a laptop? You're not going to steal a purse? You steal candy, but you're not going to steal a purse? You're not going to steal car keys? You're not going to steal things that have an apparent value to them versus stealing some candy, some gloves, some chapstick, some headphones that were in the bag? That doesn't make sense. The prosecutor must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos tried to do an attempted larceny, that he attempted to take some of Samantha Wall's property without consent. There was movement of that property or attempted movement of that property. And he intended to deprive Samantha Wall of that particular property. And they can't prove that. There was no attempt. Because if there was an attempt, they would have been successful. He would have been successful in removing whatever property he wanted from that particular location. He would have took things. Things of value. What else was, we've heard from witnesses, if there was something of value that was taken, surely the prosecution would have put that witness on the stand and say, oh, I know Samantha has this particular item, and it's not there no more. Or Samantha has this particular item, and it's not there no more. All her items of value were there. So now the prosecutor wants to try to insinuate and suggest like, oh, we don't know whether or not anything was taken. They can't prove anything was taken because nothing was taken other than Samantha Wall's life from somebody who intended to take her life. And I feel bad for not just Samantha Wall, but the family, because they're not getting justice. They're not getting justice right now. With this individual on stand, on the trial, fighting for his life, this is not justice. This is not justice. Like I said, the blood tells the story. Samantha Wall is speaking through her blood. The fact that this particular incident extended for a period of time. She was in the apartment for a period of time. She then got up, triggered the motion, stumbled outside, and collapsed. This did not happen in a matter of 2 minutes. Their own experts contradict that. Their own experts contradict their very theory that Samantha Wall got stabbed and then stumbled outside. And they want you to believe that Samantha Wall didn't start bleeding until whoever did this left the scene. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Whoever's footprint that was, in record 26, because we know it's not Mr. Jackson-Bolanos' footprint, whoever's footprint that is the killer.
Judge objection. Can we approach on that?
Yes.
being obstructionist, once again, like I stated, that record number 26 that they ran against my client in his shoes that was inconclusive, did they run that report against any shoes of Jeff Hersman? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Had they did it, would they have found a match? Probably so. Probably so. But once again, they left stones unturned, and they want to give some impression that they were so thorough with this investigation. We were super thorough with this investigation before we eventually charged Mr. Jackson-Bolanos. No, they were getting pressure from outside sources, just like Sergeant Ford stated on the interview. The media wants a conclusion to this. Yes, they do. The media wants a conclusion. This was a highly publicized case, and they were getting pressure from outside sources to find somebody that they can charge with this murder. And Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, he just fits he's just a perfect criminal, black guy in the city. Now, I'm not saying this is a racial thing. I'm not saying this is a racial thing at all, but this guy with a criminal past who's in a situation and in a location that he should not be in, he is committing crimes. We're not taking that away. He is committing petty larcenies. But he's no murderer. And they cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he's a murderer at all. Definitely they can't prove that he went inside the house. Because the truth begets truth. Lies beget lies. It's like when Ford, how you going to be deceptive with somebody and then expect the truth? Especially when you put people on guard. See, like the truth is like water. And what I mean that, it's not just because we need the truth to survive, like we need water to survive. The truth is like water in the sense that if I take this bottle of water right now and I pour some gasoline in this water and I shake it up, then I drink the water. The water's going to be bitter, it's going to be nasty. Why? Because that gasoline is going to contaminate the water. Same thing with the truth. If I had a bottle of truth and then I shake it up and I put some lies in there, it's going to be bitter because why? The lies will contaminate the truth. Now, Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, he took this stand and he was very truthful. And just like water can be filtered for contaminants, an individual can lie originally, admit to those lies, and going forward, be completely honest. He said what he was doing down there. He never escaped responsibility. He never pointed his finger at anybody and say, oh, this homeless guy did this. Even the detective himself said that. He never tried to point the blame at anybody and say, yeah, I saw a homeless person buy this or could have did that. No, the homeless person was on the other side of the street. Couldn't have did that. At all. Yeah, he stated that he didn't touch the body originally, but then he came clean. He told police officer Chad Osmond, in fact, what had happened. And Osmond obviously was nervous, obviously felt some type of pressure because he wanted to say that he couldn't remember whether or not Mr. Jackson-Bolanos told him that he touched the body. And then confronted with Officer Osmond, do you remember me, myself, and you having a conversation? Kept looking at the prosecutor. I don't know if he felt like he was going to get in trouble because he didn't follow protocol as far as putting that into his report or that his body cam was off. But the truth is that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos told a Detroit police officer sworn to uphold the law that in fact he came across Samantha Wall and he touched the body. Now, whether or not Osmond put that into his report, that's beyond Mr. Jackson-Bolanos' control. Whether or not he told somebody. Now, I can guarantee you that if Mr. Jackson-Bolanos would have said, I killed her, that would have been in Osmond's report. But it's very convenient that the statement that's consistent with what he told his lawyer, that he touched the body, that's left out the report. Now, they want to talk about, oh, this phone call where Mr. Jackson-Bolanos is denying going to her pockets. There was an insinuation that, okay, yeah, Mr. Jackson-Bolanos, yeah, he is innocent. The judge's like, okay, yeah, more or less, yeah, he is probably innocent. But being the thief he is, quote unquote, from the judge, he probably tried to go into her pockets, and that's how he got the blood on her. And Mr. Jackson-Bolanos categorically denied that part of the statement. The fact that there was an insinuation that he went into her pocket. No, I don't do any weird stuff like that. I'm not going to go into the dead person's pocket. That's what he meant. And they tried to just show you play a portion of that card. They take it out of context. And then try to show, play a card that indicating, okay, if this is poker. Poker is poker. Poker is chance. It's a game of chance. So if somebody used that particular thing, sometimes you got to play the cards that are dealt in poker. You got to play the hand that you're dealt. And some things are beyond your control in that particular field. So he's trying to insinuate that, because poker is based upon deceit. This ain't no deceit. We don't know exactly what happened. I have a good idea who did it. Now, what exactly would happen in that apartment? I don't know. So it's a theory. But as far as my theory, as far as who did it, I think it makes more sense than what they're saying of who did it. There's no reason whatsoever why Mr. Jackson-Bolanos would have went in there and stabbed her 8 times. Could not have done it in that amount of time. And then walked towards a group of people, not running. Just doesn't make sense. So ladies and gentlemen of the jury, your job, your duty, is to be the gatekeepers, to stand on the front line of this injustice, of these insinuations that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos committed this murder. I don't know if they believe it themselves. Detective Sanchez, Lieutenant Sanchez, he's seeing the picture of Jeff Hersman and running. It might have, a light bulb might have shifted on in his head. And after you guys do your job, because that's what they want you to do. They want you to do their job. They want you to say, because it's a possibility. They're not doing their job. They're not showing the work on how Mr. Jackson-Bolanos could have been inside that house. They're not showing the work. They just jump into a conclusion saying, he was in the area, therefore he did it. You got to show your work. Just like when we was in elementary school and we had long divisions. When they asked you, was 757 divided by 41? We couldn't just give an answer. We had to divide and do the subtraction. We had to show our work on how we got to that conclusion. They just jump into a conclusion. They want to show you all this misdirection. We interviewed hers, and then we did this. Where's the proof that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos went inside this house? It doesn't exist. Where's the proof that he had an attempt to go in there to commit an assault or a larceny? There's no proof. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we ask you to do your job as jurors and see that the prosecution has failed to meet their burden beyond any type of doubt. Any doubt, or reasonable doubt. There's no doubt at all that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos is innocent. Not just not guilty, he's innocent. It's not just that the prosecutor hasn't proved their burden. It's that there's so much evidence that would suggest that another individual committed this particular murder. And as long as that is evident, you must come back with a not guilty on the charges. And in regards to the lying to the police officer, the crimes that were being investigated, that's an element. These are detectives, homicide detectives. They weren't investigating larcenies. There was not any type of criminal investigation for larcenies. Why wasn't Mr. Jackson-Bolanos charged? Homicide detectives don't investigate larcenies. They investigate homicides. Just like when they showed Mr. Jackson-Bolanos' card, the homicide card, Sergeant Ford in Lane, Mr. Jackson-Bolanos became emotional and said, like, "Hey, I don't have anything to do with any homicide. That's not me. He's a homicide because they can't even meet number 2 of the elements, because there was no larcenies that's ever being investigated. They weren't investigating. They were trying to lure him in. They were investigating the homicide, and they beat all around the bush. They started talking about some glasses. Then they started talking about some cars they was never charged with. Nobody was ever interviewed. They never even tried to find out whether or not somebody's car was actually open and things removed from it. It was all aroused in order to try to insinuate that Mr. Jackson-Bolanos committed this murder, and he did not. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you must find Mr. Jackson-Bolanos not guilty on our charges. Thank you.
We're going to break for lunch until 2:30, and we're going to have the people rebuttal after lunch, and then final instructions. Okay? Please. All right, for the jury. Michel Jackson-Bolanos on the docket today for jury trial in progress. Appearances, please.
Good morning, Your Honor. Ryan Elsie for people.
Dominic DeGrazia on behalf of people.
Ryan Brown on behalf of Mr. Jackson-Bolanos.
Good morning, Your Honor. Colonel Christian Wilson, co-counsel on behalf of Mr. Jackson-Bolanos.
I hope we reckon Mr. Jackson-Bolanos is present. Our 14 jurors have returned. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you had a good holiday weekend. And we left off with Mr. Jackson-Bolanos on the stand yesterday, or on Wednesday. So, sir, if you could come forward, be sworn by the clerk again. From the chair.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do swear.
Thank you. Proceed.
State your name and just.
Michael Michel Jackson-Bolanos, B-O-L-A-N-O-S.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Jackson-Bolanos. When we left off on Wednesday, we had just previously heard two separate jail calls between you and Tier.
Yes.
And in one of those calls, you mentioned, I guess there was some conversation about a washing of the jacket.
Yes. I wasn't aware that she had washed it.
Okay. When did you become aware that she had washed it?
That phone call.
That phone call? Has she ever told you prior to that phone call that she washed the jacket?
No.
Did she tell you, did you tell her to wash the jacket?
No.
Does she wear that jacket?
She does.
Okay. And how often does she wash your clothes?
Whenever I just put clothes in a basket.
Okay. And on this particular, I guess, occasion on October 21st, did you put the jacket into the basket?
Yeah, I did.
And when you put it into the basket, did you notice any blood on the jacket?
No.
Now, you were speaking with Tiara and you were, I guess, saying no, no, no on the second call after the first call. Why were you saying that?
The call was being recorded and monitored, and I knew the prosecutor was looking for anything, so I didn't want to be perceived as guilty by washing a coat that I did not wash or intend to wash, like to look as if I was hiding anything.
You also made some statements about, I guess, you would exit out this.
What
do you mean by that?
I was just referring to, like, it was Michael Jackson, Jackson 5, like, all that's dead. Like, I'm not about to go to jail for something I didn't do. So I said I was going to exit out this jail system.
Okay. And what did you mean by that when you said you would exit out the jail system?
Just like I would leave the jail system.
And what way would you leave the jail system?
I mean, the legal way.
The legal way? Now, I want to go to People's Exhibit 1. I want to ask you some questions about, I guess, which route you would have taken.
grab that pointer. Yes. Now, when you originally made your approach down Brevard Street, which route did you take?
When I was coming down the street, I had made a left on Lafayette.
Okay. And where on the map did you first encounter this gray backpack?
On this street where these cars would be parked at.
Okay. And where did you place this backpack?
When I found it in the car right about here, I noticed there was a walkway right here. I put it in the bushes at the corner. That was when I noticed the cars in the parking lot that I said that I would just come back to check out those cars. And then I placed it in there after searching through it, like, and then I walked that way and went to this place right here.
Okay, and what did you do at that place? And what's the name of that place if you...
Ducharme Place.
Ducharme Place, okay. And what did you do when you went to the Ducharme Place?
That was where I had found that Challenger Scat Pack.
Okay, and did you do anything with that Challenger Scat Pack?
I took pictures of it.
Took pictures of it, okay. And on your way back to this particular area, could you just basically just could you show us which route you took on the way back to, I guess, when you absolutely retrieved the bag?
When I retrieved the bag, or to like...
Yeah, before you retrieved the bag. So you're coming back into this particular
it's
area.
not on the screen right here, but I was walking past the Bob Maxey Ford place and cut through, and I crossed over and went through this entrance right here.
Then after you cut through the entrance, where did you go?
I checked out a few of these cars right here, then walked right here, checked out these cars, then went into this parking lot, checked out these cars, then came out, seen security, I ducked behind a car over here, he made his way down, he parked at the corner, I checked a few of these cars, and then when he was pulling off again, I didn't know if he was coming back around, I took this walkway. I'm out to come retrieve the bag from right here.
Okay, and when you took this walkway that you just showed us, what, if anything, did you see?
That was when I saw a dark figure upon, like, right here on the ground.
You were there, or the dark figure was there?
Well, when I was walking, that's where the dark figure was, about right here. I was walking about, like, right here.
Okay. And you stated that at first, could you tell what this dark figure was?
Not at first, until I got, like, close enough to see that it was a person. I hadn't fully come into contact yet.
Okay. And at some point in time, did you realize it was a person?
Objection. Your Honor, we've already gone over all this. Now he wants to go over this again. These have all been asked and answered.
They have been asked and answered.
Now, you stated, I guess, on Wednesday, that you, when I asked you, could you tell the race of the person? Remember that?
Yeah, I stated that I couldn't. I didn't know whether she was, like, Italian, British, or German, or, Swedish, or whatever.
Okay. Did you know whether or not she was black or white?